Good morning, everyone. My name's Tina Chander and I head up the employment team at Wright Hassel. Thank you so much for attending our mock tribunal today. We really hope that you learn quite a lot from the tribunal process, which we're going to deliver. Just to let you know a little bit about my team, we're all getting involved as much as possible. So by way of introduction, Joanne Duck, if you'd like to stand up. Joanne's an associate in my team and she will be playing a witness part. Georgia Wood. Georgia is our paralegal and she will be playing the claimant's part. Nisha Williams. Nisha is also an associate in my team and she will be bringing in the judge very shortly. We have held this event in conjunction with award-winning chambers St Philip's. St Philip's are based in Birmingham. They do have other offices across the country too. For my part, I've used St Philip's for a number of years. They are a fantastic set of chambers and they have a variety of employment barristers, all different levels of experience, who can hit the road running anytime we want their assistance. We're very lucky today to have Bruce Frew, who is a barrister at St Philip's Chambers. Morning. Jonathan Hurd, who's also a barrister at St Philip's Chambers. The judge is yet to be revealed, but his name is Peter Starchevich, and you will shortly meet him. The purpose of today's mock tribunal is to give you all some insight as to what happens when a claim is issued against a business. Now, we would all like to hope that we will never receive a tribunal claim. I think that's a little bit unrealistic. In this day and age, claimants are very quick to issue a claim, whether it's vexatious, frivolous, or their dismissal genuinely was unfair. With the removal of tribunal fees, it's not an issue for them to bring a claim. The issue becomes for you guys to defend it. So we're hoping today, by bringing this mini tribunal to you, that you will get to see the tribunal process in its real form. You will have the opportunity to also consider what you would deliver as the judgment, and you will have the benefit of seeing real-life barristers cross-examine the employment team. So I hope you really do enjoy this event today. I'm now going to ask Nisha Williams to bring in the judge.
When the judge comes in a tribunal, we all stand. So.
All rise for employment judge Starchevich.
Well, please be seated, everybody. Thank you very much. My name's Peter Starchevich. I'm your employment judge for today. And we have on my right-hand side Mr. Hurd. You're representing the claimant.
Yes,
that's Tina Leaf. And which one is Tina Leaf? You're Tina Leaf. And Mr. Frew, you're representing Berry's Supermarket.
I am, sir. Good morning.
And you've got two witnesses with you, as I understand it. You've got the dismissing officer, Rachel Hangham, who's your Rachel Hangham, and Rebecca Hangham, and Rachel Salome, who is a manager in Berry's Supermarkets. Now, we seem to have a packed gallery today. Can I remind everybody here that if you've got a mobile phone, can you put it to silent? We don't want these proceedings interrupted. We're going to have to operate to a strict timetable today, and so I'm going to have a look at some of the issues that we've got in the case. Mr. Hurd, you have claimed in your ET1 unfair dismissal. That's right, isn't it?
That's right, sir.
And also breach of contract in failure to give notice paid because you summarily dismiss.
Indeed.
There is also a claim that appears to be sex discrimination, and in the preliminary hearing notes, which is at page 23 in the bundle, you appear to put the case that the dismissal itself was unfair, was tainted with unlawful discrimination. Now, if you are maintaining that case, you would have to show that the dismissing officer, Rebecca Hangham, actually had unlawful discrimination operating upon her mind. It's not enough to show that some other person, namely Rachel Salome, procured that dismissal. So what I'm asking you now is, are you pursuing that claim of sex discrimination as put in the issues at page 23, or are you seeking to amend that, pursue it in some other way and make the accusation against Rachel Salome, or are you not pursuing it at all?
So we're not pursuing that allegation. Since this case management hearing, the claimant's reviewed her position, and we're not saying that Rebecca Hangham dismissed the claimant because of the claimant's gender. So we are not pursuing that particular claim today.
Yes, and not that you could have any objection to that, but you're aware, Mr. Frood, that that limits the issues now to simple unfair dismissal and the notice paid, breach of contract.
I fully understand that, sir, but might I say that Miss Salome has come along today in order to provide evidence, predominantly in regard to the sex discrimination claim. It's only today that my learned friend has explained to me that that is now going to be withdrawn, and I'm flabbergasted by the timing, frankly, sir. And whilst, of course, I can't object to it, and I would be seeking dismissal of that claim on the basis that it's been withdrawn, I do wish to reserve the issue of costs, given that preparation has been given to the issue, a significant issue of discrimination, and if I could perhaps take instructions as to whether or not I address you on that costs application at the end of the hearing, sir.
Yes, well, we can deal with costs at the end of the hearing. Of course, one of the differences between the unfair dismissal claim and the notice pay claim is that for unfair dismissal, I have to look into what was in the mind of the dismissing officer and the information that was available at the time, whereas for notice pay, so far as capability is concerned, as far as conduct is concerned, you have to actually show that you had, in fact, grounds to dismiss, and so the evidence of Miss Salome is relevant in any event.
I fully appreciate that, sir, and of course I am relying upon and continue to rely upon the evidence of Miss Salome in the circumstances.
Yes. And so the issues in the case are, firstly, is dismissal admitted? And so if dismissal is admitted, then it's for you to start to give your evidence. There will then be issues on whether there was a fair procedure. I presume you're saying there was not a fair procedure.
Correct, sir.
And a fair investigation. I have to determine that in accordance with Section 98 of the Employment Rights Act. But then we also get to any issues of contributory conduct, and
So
you
yes.
rely on contributory conduct.
And Polky, sir.
And Polky, whether if a fair procedure had been carried out, she would have been dismissed in any event.
You're quite right, sir, yes.
I propose that we deal with the issue of liability, including contribution and Polky, and if there is an unfair dismissal, then we will deal with the amount of compensation and remedy at another hearing or later on today. Is that agreeable to you both?
Certainly.
Entirely agreeable, sir. So I wonder if I could just raise one issue, if it's a convenient time to interject. In the circumstances, I'm going to ask that extraordinarily the witnesses are asked to read out their witness statements. I wonder if that would be satisfactory today. So.
Yes, well, the normal course is for them to be taken as read. I have actually read the witness statements, but I'm perfectly happy for that to happen. So that's what we'll do. In terms of progressing this matter, it's now getting on for, it's 25 past 9. Who are you calling first? Is it the Miss Hangham that
it's
you're
Miss Hangham, sir, yes.
Calling first? And then Miss Salome. I then propose that we have a break. So I think if we can aim for Miss Hangham and Miss Salome's evidence to be complete by around about 10:30, and then we'll have about a 15-minute break, and then we shall then hear from your client, if you choose to call her, Mr. Hurd, until, that'll be from about 10:45, until we really want to finish the evidence about 11:30, and then you can have 15 minutes each on your submissions, and then I'll probably go back to my room and decide my judgment and give a judgment shortly after 12:15, something like that, so that we can finish by 12:30. Is that clear with you all? Right. Mr. Frew, if you call your first witness.
Thank you, sir. So if I could, as I stated, sir, start with Rebecca Hangham. Miss Hangham, if you could just come to the witness stand, please, but remain standing, please.
Now, Miss Hangham, as I understand it, you've chosen to affirm.
Yes, sir.
And so can you read the cards, read the words on the card, please?
I, Rebecca Hangham, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Please be seated now. Can you confirm your full name and address to me, please?
My name is Rebecca Hangham, and I live in 70 Heaton Road, Solihull.
Thank you very much.
So, sorry to interrupt. I wonder if Miss Hangham could have her address recorded as the head office of the respondent, just as it states in
yes,
paragraph
33
1. Sir.
Hoxton.
Yes, sir.
London. Yes, that's fine.
Thank you, sir. Now, Miss Hangham, before you begin reading out your witness statement, could you just turn to the last page and confirm that that is your signature? It's page 66 of the bundle.
Yes, it is.
You've confirmed your full name and address. In relation to the contents of the witness statement, is it yours?
Yes.
Is it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
And are you happy for it to be used as part of your evidence today?
Yes.
Thank you. If you could begin reading, please. Perhaps if we could start from paragraph 2.
Okay. On 2nd April 2017, I was instructed by my manager to conduct a disciplinary hearing into potentially very serious case of attempted theft against Tina Leaf, who has been employed by Berries for 7 years as a general assistant at our Ruffle Court Road store. The hearing had been arranged for 4th April. As part of my preparation, I asked for and was given the relevant extracts from the staff handbook, statements from Wendy William and Jemima Legg, CCTV summary, the notes of the fact-finding interview, and the invitation to disciplinary letter. I read all of these. I have met Rachel Salome before. She is the Ruffle Court Road store's general manager. She attended training that I provided on profit protection at head office on 25th of March 2017. She was very diligent, and I recall her taking copious notes on all the various ways colleagues and customers may try and steal from our stores. She was very interested in the way colleagues have tried to steal from us. I remember thinking she was taking the training very seriously. I have never met or heard of Miss Leaf before being involved in this matter. The profit protection team is very important to Berries. Our business has become very competitive with pressure from the budget operators. We are feeling the squeeze, and it is apparent that some of our target competitors are under the pressure as well. As such, my role is very important, as the more money I can keep from getting stolen, the better it is for all of us. I decided to do some of my own background investigations. I looked for other high-value stock discrepancies. I quickly noticed that on 27th of February 2017, the day of the release of FIFA 14, another very popular high-value computer game, the Ruffle Court Road store suffered another massive stock discrepancy of some 45 FIFA games. I also noticed that we had one more large, super fast, super quiet Berries kettle that the till receipts said we should have had. At least we found the kettle and its packaging, but no box. The till record showed that the box at least had been purchased at the customer service desk for cash. The kettle retailed at £29.99 and the retail value of the missing FIFA 14 games was £2,250. I tried to obtain CCTV of the kettle purchase, but unfortunately it is impossible to work out who made the purchase. I thought to myself, hello, somebody is on the right little earner here, this is going to stop. I checked to see whether the claimant was in the store that day, and she was. I did not feel that I could put this allegation to the claimant, as I had no proof that she stole the FIFA 14 games. But in my mind, I did think how remarkably similar her situation was to the incident involving the FIFA games. I recall the claimant kept asking for the hearing to be postponed. HR kept agreeing, and eventually I had to put my foot down, or otherwise she would still be off sick. Her GP did confirm that she was unwell, but he did not say that she could not attend the meeting. I instructed HR to tell the claimant that the meeting would go ahead on 25th of April 2017, whether she attended or not. I have read the notes of the disciplinary hearing, and I can confirm that they are accurate. I do recall the claimant's union representative, Miss Tant. She was very rude and aggressive, and I did not think she helped her client at all. I listened to what they both said. I just did not buy it, excuse the pun. The claimant acted she was trying to steal from us. I had evidence of 2 witnesses and the CCTV summary. The claimant accepted that she had tried to take the box through the tills. She was caught red-handed. The claimant suggested that she had been set up by her general store manager. I dismissed this as absurd. If true, I might have expected the claimant to have mentioned it when she was first interviewed. Anyway, I had met Miss Salome and I found her rather charming. She did not strike me as someone who would try and orchestrate a person's dismissal because they were female. Her store has 45 colleagues, of which 32 are female. What the claimant was suggesting was absurd. After letting the claimant and her firebrand union rep say their piece, I adjourned the hearing and considered what I had heard. I completed the disciplinary hearing manager's checklist. I decided that the claimant had in fact been guilty of gross misconduct. I set out why in my letter of termination. I stand by those reasons. I'm absolutely satisfied that I have carried out a thorough investigation. Once I had decided the claimant was guilty, the sanction was obvious. No one is going to try to pull off a theft like that on my watch. It is a tough sector to make profit in, and we cannot afford to employ colleagues that steal from us. I confirmed my decision after the adjournment. The union rep was really unacceptably rude. I got the distinct impression that the claimant was not going to appeal my decision. After the hearing, I wrote to the claimant confirming my decision and reminding her of her right to appeal my decision if she did not accept it. I have had no more dealings with Miss Leaf.
Any supplementary questions?
I don't, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. So, cross-examination, please, Mr. Hurd.
Good morning, Ms. Hangham.
What is it?
Got a number of questions for you, beginning at the beginning. You've read out what you referred to in paragraph 3 of your witness statement, all of the evidence that you were provided with ahead of the disciplinary hearing. Yeah?
Yes.
And from reading that evidence, you understood that the charge was one of attempted theft, didn't you?
Yes.
And from what you had read, which included the CCTV summary and the investigation hearing minutes, and also the statement of the two witnesses, Wendy Williams and Jeremiah Lagg.
Yeah.
From that information, you had decided and predetermined that the claimant was guilty of that charge, didn't you?
No.
You had approached the disciplinary hearing with a closed mind, didn't you?
No.
Can you turn to page 44 of the bundle, please? 44. Now we can see at 44, can't we, a summary of the CCTV footage.
Yes.
And if we look at the top entry, electoral goods cage, 1st April 17 at 10:56, we can see a timeline there, can't we?
Yes.
So when you read this ahead of the disciplinary hearing, you would have understood that that particular part of the timeline referred to things that the claimant, Miss Leaf, was doing, yes?
Yes.
And also what RS was doing. And you understood RS, did you not, to be Rachel Salome?
Yes.
Now, from what you would have read in this section of the summary, then if you had an open mind about the charge, you would have thought that perhaps Rachel Salome was involved in some wrongdoing.
I don't agree.
Well, she's recorded as being there at the time around the cage with the claimant, handing the claimant an item.
Yeah.
She should have been on your radar as someone to go and speak to, shouldn't she?
No, because the claimant, the games were in the claimant's box, and she tried to scan it with some lollies.
Looking at this CCTV summary, and this is before the disciplinary hearing started, could be quite possible, couldn't it, that there might have been an involvement in Miss Salome in this alleged theft?
Sorry, sir, I'm going to interrupt. It's never been the case to date that they were the claimant and Miss Salome were working in concert. Is that what is being put? So if I could just check that, because that seems to be a change in the direction of the claimant's case.
Well, I'm going to allow him to continue his questioning, but he's got to be aware that I'm not considering whether or not Miss Salome was also guilty of misconduct and may have been involved. I'm solely here to consider whether Tina Leaf was guilty of misconduct, and indeed whether there was sufficient information for this witness to reasonably come to that conclusion. So carry on, Mr. Hurd, but just be aware of what's relevant and what's not.
Of course, I'm very grateful. The point I'm seeking to make, Ms. Hangham, is that any reasonable person investigating and conducting a disciplinary hearing involving a charge of attempted theft against the claimant, when looking at the CCTV summary, would have wanted to go and speak to Ms. Salome to get her evidence about what happened on that particular day.
Well,
that's a fair observation, is it not?
no, because Rebecca alerted security, to have a look at the claimant's box because she had a feeling something wasn't right, and she was right. The claimant had games in the box that should have been an electrical iron.
You, prior to the disciplinary hearing, have explained to the tribunal that you had met Miss Salome before. There was you deal with this in paragraph 3.
Yes.
There was a profit protection
Training
that you were providing in March of last 2017. In short, from your interaction with Miss Salome on that event, you thought you were impressed by her and you thought that she was charming, didn't you?
I thought that she took a really proactive interest in how customers and colleagues could try and steal from berries, and how to look out for indicators of people stealing.
And also, before the disciplinary hearing started, you were aware from the investigation hearing minutes that the claimant's position, Miss Leaf, was that she was innocent of this attempted theft. She didn't know anything about how these games got in the box.
That's what she's saying.
At no time during your involvement with this case did you look for any exculpatory evidence, any evidence that would have helped the claimant in showing her innocence, did you?
The claimant's responses to the allegations were ridiculous. She practically ran away from the security guard. She made an effort to avoid tills where there were staff that could have scanned her item, and those tills were free. Her reaction was one of a guilty person in my mind.
Well, I'll come on to your rationale in a few moments, but keeping with the chronology, again before the disciplinary hearing, you took your own investigatory steps, didn't you, by looking into stock discrepancies at that Ruffle Court Road store previously, didn't you?
It was just background. It wasn't part of the investigation that formed my decision to dismiss the claimant. It was just a bit of background information I wanted about the store.
Well, you say in your witness statement, you thought, hello, somebody's on a right to learner here, this is going to stop. And at paragraph 6, you accept that you had this previous event in your mind, yes, at the time just before the disciplinary hearing?
I had in my mind how these things seemed to be happening at the store.
And you say in paragraph 6 that you thought it was remarkably similar to the situation that the claimant found herself in.
Yes.
In short, you thought that the claimant was involved in this previous incident and weighed that against the claimant in determining her guilt, didn't you?
No, I simply checked to see whether she was working that day, and she wasn't. So in my mind, that had left, and I was just solely looking at the allegation of the 30 other games that were found in the box that should have had an iron in.
So your evidence to the tribunal is that when you checked about this previous discrepancy in the stock, you found out that the claimant actually on that particular day was not working. That was your evidence just a few months ago. Is that right?
No, I checked to see whether the claimant was in the store that day, and she was. She was in the store that day, but I had no evidence to suggest that the claimant had taken those FIFA games.
Moving to the disciplinary hearing minutes, please, at page 53. Looking at the entry just below the second hole punch, there's a discussion, isn't there, between yourself and the claimant's union representative about the health of the claimant, wasn't there?
Yes.
You were aware that the disciplinary hearing had been postponed on 2 occasions prior to the disciplinary hearing, weren't you?
Yes.
And before you started the disciplinary hearing, you had decided in your mind that there was no way that this hearing was going to be postponed, didn't you?
Yes.
You had read and received the GP letter from the claimant before the hearing at page 51, did you not?
Yes, I'd seen this.
And we can see from the first paragraph, her GP is saying that the claimant presented in a state of extreme anxiety, if not panic. In the second paragraph, GP wrote that the claimant cannot sleep, lost the motivation to care for herself and her daughter. From reading that, you understood that health-wise, the claimant was in a very bad way.
The claimant was too unwell to work. That's what I've read from this letter.
And you understood that, according to Dr. Rollover, that the disciplinary process itself and the contact with the respondent was exacerbating the claimant's symptoms, didn't you?
Well, she was clearly panicked and in a state of extreme anxiety, according to Dr. Rollover. But that's probably because she thinks she was set up by the general store manager and she didn't want to face the allegations against her.
If we go back to the first page of the disciplinary hearing minutes at page 53, please, by the second hole punch, we can see that Millie Tant, 4 lines up from the bottom, said, it's pretty bloody clear she's not well. And it was obvious to you, wasn't it, that the claimant wasn't well in how she appeared to you at this hearing?
No, the claimant appeared fine, actually. It seemed to me that she was stressed and she was anxious, and she was doing what she could to avoid attending the disciplinary hearing. The GP has not said at any point that she wasn't fit enough to attend a disciplinary hearing. And when our personnel manager wrote to her on the 17th of April to let her know that disciplinary hearing would be going ahead on the 25th of April, at no point did the claimant or her rep object to it. There was a significant period of time between her receiving the final letter on the 17th of April and her attending.
You had the authority to postpone the disciplinary hearing if you thought it proper to, didn't you?
Yes.
It wasn't even 1 month since the allegation itself, was it, by the time of the disciplinary hearing?
No.
The claimant presented unwell at that hearing, and you should have postponed that hearing until she was better, shouldn't you?
No, I disagree.
You weren't interested during this hearing in listening to the claimant's version of events, were you?
I was. I've done a lot of disciplinary hearings during my employment, and I'm fully aware of a process to follow, and I gave the claimant an opportunity to answer the allegations against her.
You didn't give her an opportunity, and an example of that, let me put the question again. You didn't give her the full opportunity to present her case during this hearing, did you?
I did. Unfortunately for her, her trade union representative had more to say.
And you didn't allow that trade union representative to say everything that she wanted to say, did you?
The trade union representative had plenty of opportunities to speak. She was frequently interrupting me.
You also, we don't accept that. You were in fact interrupting her, weren't you?
Well, I wanted to get on and listen to the claimant's version of events in respect to the allegations. That was the purpose of a disciplinary hearing.
Now, if you look at page 54 of the bundle, towards the top, third box down, page 54,
Yeah.
at the end, you asked, "Are you ready?" Do you see that?
Sorry, no.
So, third box down from the top, the last
yes.
question, "Are you ready?" That's you asking, "Are you ready?"
Yeah.
And Tina Leaf said, "I understand, but I would like more," and you interrupted and said, "Good ho, let's crack on then." That's an example of you cutting in and not allowing the claimant an opportunity to say what she wanted to say, isn't it?
I don't agree. The claimant and her representative, particularly her representative, were very open to speaking. The claimant allowed her representative to do a lot of talking, and her representative was not shy about butting in when she felt it was appropriate. The claimant also didn't, once I'd said to her, "Good ho, let's crack on," she didn't say, "You haven't let me finish. No, I don't want to carry on. I don't think I can do this."
And if we go down to the middle of this page, on page 54, we have an entry that records what Tina Leaf said, picking up where she says, "Yes, look, I know how it looks like. I know it looks like I tried to steal those computer games, but why would I? I hate computer games and Daisy is too young to know what they are. I was stitched up good and proper." So you understood that the claimant was saying that she'd been stitched up, she'd been set up,
Yes.
and you were closed-minded to that, weren't you?
Not at all. This was her disciplinary hearing. The rhetorical question as to why would I, that's not a matter for me to answer.
Well, the giveaway reaction I'm going to suggest that you were closed-minded is that the first thing that you say after she said that she was stitched up was, "I doubt that." That shows that you weren't even entertaining her case, her defence to the charge, doesn't it?
No, I disagree again. When I said I doubt it, that wasn't a conclusive view. I just doubted it.
We certainly weren't interested in investigating this case further by seeing if there was anything in her allegation that she'd been stitched up, did you?
The investigation that was conducted, in my mind, was enough.
And going down the bottom of page 54, Miss Leaf explained to you, didn't she, "I saw a discounted iron which I wanted, so I decided I would hide it in the cage until the end of my shift." And you said colleagues should not do that. She said everyone does it. You said discounts are meant for customers, not colleagues. In your mind, did you think that because Tina Leaf shouldn't be doing that, that was evidence of her guilt?
Not at all.
Going to the top of page 55, you understood what Tina Leaf was saying happened, that Miss Salome came over and asked me what I was doing. I told her and she said, "Don't take that iron. A customer has just returned one to the customer service desk, saying it had no instructions. It had been opened, but I could reseal it for you and give you a further discount." I thought she was being nice, so I said yes. After a bit, she came back with the iron. I could see that the box had been opened and then resealed. It had a further discount. I thanked Rachel, and then hid it in the cage. So there, the claimant is telling you about her conversation that she had with Miss Salome.
Yeah.
You didn't think to go and speak to Miss Salome from this information to see what Miss Salome had to say, did you?
No.
Because if Miss Salome agreed with what the claimant was telling you, that would support the claimant's version of events, wouldn't it?
Well, I know Miss Salome has confirmed in her statement that she did give the claimant the opportunity to have a further discount on an iron. I can see from the CCTV summary that the claimant was in the electrical goods area on her own for a significant period of time.
Well, you didn't have Miss Salome's statement at the time of this disciplinary hearing. That's a statement produced for the purposes of this hearing, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, as we go further down the page, in the middle box, it's recorded, isn't it, that Miss Leaf said, "She hated me. She likes the attention of all the boys, but I was getting it as she is a bit rough next to me. She resented me. I think she had this clever plan to plant stolen property on me and then get me nicked when I left the store. She certainly would not have done that to a man. She targeted me because I'm a pretty girl. She got me out because I'm a girl." And then the claimant, a little later, starts crying. So that was the claimant's defence. That was her position, that this was all a setup, and she gave you the motivation for this setup. Yet you didn't think it necessary to go and speak to Miss Salome about this, to test the claimant's position, because you had already made up your mind about her guilt, hadn't you?
No, I just thought what the claimant was saying was a very desperate attempt to get out of responding to the allegations.
You were aware at this point in time that you had the claimant, an employee who had been working for the company for about 7.5 years.
Yes.
Clean disciplinary record, yes?
Yes.
So she was a loyal employee, wasn't she?
She was a good employee, yes.
Yes, fighting for her job, wasn't she?
Yes.
She presented you a defence whereby, if true, she would be completely innocent of this charge, yet you thought, well, I'm not going to investigate this by even speaking to Miss Salome about it.
I felt the investigation that had been conducted was adequate. And what the claimant was saying was simply trying to push away from the focus of the disciplinary hearing the allegation that she needed to answer.
A little further down on page 55, we can see an entry after the adjournment. So page 55, 6 boxes up from the bottom. After the adjournment, you say, right, let's start again. I can see all the snivelling has stopped. The use of your word snivelling is telling, I'm going to suggest to the tribunal. It's a derogatory word, isn't it? It's a
No. I use
pejorative word, isn't it?
No, it's quite a common word.
And it represents the view that you took of the claimant, which was a negative view, wasn't it?
No, I can't see how using the word snivelling has any impact whatsoever.
Turning over the page to page 56, you invite Mrs. Tant to say what she wanted to say, and in the second box you can see, can't you, it's recorded the 4 points that Mrs. Tant was asking you to investigate.
Oh yeah, she had a list of questions she wanted to read out.
You weren't interested in any of them, were you?
Those questions, if they were significant and really important to the claimant, I just can't understand why the claimant or her representative did not ask at the start of the disciplinary hearing or any time before the disciplinary hearing. Bear in mind it had been postponed already twice.
So in short, you felt that there's no duty upon you to investigate more than what had happened already?
No. I felt, as I've already said, I felt the investigation was adequate.
At point 2, Ms. Tant questioned, why was the checkout captain ready to swoop down on Tina? Why was the security on her case straight away? Had they been primed? That supported the claimant's case that she was set up, didn't it?
Not at all. Have you not seen the statements from Rachel and CCTV and the security team? It's not uncommon in a supermarket for us to carry out random searches.
But it wasn't a random search, was it? From the statements we know that they were both asked by Ms. Salome at 4:15 and 4:10 respectively, to look out for a specific electrical item in a box that weighed inaccurately. It's evidence of a setup, isn't it?
No. It's, in a supermarket environment, colleagues do steal. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Rachel had actually offered the claimant a double discount on an iron and had a reasonable belief that something wasn't right, acted on that reasonable belief, and I found, as part of my disciplinary hearing, that the claimant was guilty.
Well, you make reference to what Ms. Salome was saying about giving a double discount and being suspicious about the claimant's behaviour. But that wasn't information that you knew at the time of the disciplinary hearing. That's what's in her statement written for the purposes of this hearing.
Yes,
Right.
but ultimately, the general store manager had a reasonable belief and had to act on it. You can't ignore a hunch.
Well, you didn't know anything about that at the time of the disciplinary hearing, did you?
No, but it does support my version of events.
Further down on page 56, you say, at the end of the middle box, only guilty people run. To which the claimant replied, I got in state and I had a panic. The checkout captain was really aggressive. I didn't know which way to turn, what to do, what to say. She made me so nervous by being so abrupt and horrible. It's right, isn't it, that as a general principle, innocent people can sometimes act in odd ways.
But they don't run off.
Well, you had here a situation where the claimant was saying because of the behaviour of the checkout captain, that led her to act in that particular way.
But the claimant wouldn't even let the checkout captain have a look inside the box. She was refusing to give the box.
You didn't even go back to the checkout captain or even speak to the security guard to test and sound out the claimant's allegation that they were being aggressive, did you?
No, I didn't think I needed to.
At the top of page 57, Mrs. Tant was speaking on behalf of the claimant and making reference to her 7.5 years loyal service, a 100% clear disciplinary record. And you said, second box, you mean she has not got caught before? that's a giveaway, isn't it, of your predetermination of the claimant's guilt?
No, I don't think so.
And another giveaway, on this occasion, a giveaway of your lack of interest in allowing the claimant a full opportunity to present her case. In the box right next to the first hole punch, you said, all right, I've heard enough. I'm going to adjourn and have a think about this. You were cutting the claimant off, weren't you? You were cutting her representative off, weren't you?
There was absolutely no way I could cut off that representative, even if I tried.
Now, after you had learned in this disciplinary hearing that the claimant was saying that this was a setup and that she was pointing the finger to her manager, Miss Salome,
Which was convenient.
you had relevant evidence that you didn't disclose to the claimant.
Did I?
Yes, because in your witness statement, you make reference to Miss Salome's interest in the presentation that you gave to her on the 27th of February 17. You read this out a little bit earlier.
But why would the claimant need to see that?
Sorry, I gave you the wrong date. It's the 25th of March 17. You said in your statement, paragraph 3, which you read out, that Miss Salome was very diligent at this training, taking copious notes on all the ways colleagues and customers may try to steal from our stores. She was very interested in the ways colleagues have tried to steal from us. That would have been evidence, wouldn't it, that would have assisted the claimant's case if she knew about it, because it would have given Miss Salome the know-how on the claimant's case of how to set her up.
I don't believe that's relevant for the claimant at all.
After the disciplinary hearing, you completed a checklist, didn't you? Page
Yeah.
58. You didn't answer that checklist truthfully or accurately, did you?
Yes, I did.
Because on the third, if you look at the checklist item box, on the third item, was the colleague prepared and ready to proceed? You said yes. Well, obviously they weren't, were they?
They were prepared. As
And-
I said, the claimant and her rep didn't say before the disciplinary hearing that they could not continue or at any point abandon continuing with the hearing.
And then the fifth line, column down, fifth row down rather, did the colleague say all that she needed to say? You said yes. Well, again, obviously, you cut them off and they hadn't had the opportunity to say everything they wanted to say, had they?
I disagree.
Mr. Hurd, we're 10:05 now. We've got another witness to get through, so
I'm grateful for
we're
that.
beginning to run out of time.
So I'm grateful for that reminder. Thank you. Ms. Hangham, when you came to dismiss the claimant, you didn't think of any alternatives to dismissal, did you?
We have a very strict policy at our store in relation to thefts and attempted thefts, and I'm afraid if someone's guilty of theft or attempted theft, the only sanction should be dismissal.
On one final matter, you didn't feel it appropriate, did you, to investigate the claimant's allegation that Ms. Salome reacted negatively to attractive female employees?
That was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
If true, it would have supported the claimant's case, wouldn't it?
Absolutely not. I've never heard anything so absurd.
That's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Re-examination.
I wonder if I may just on one point, sir. Ms. Hangham, you've identified Militant, the union representative, ultimately as being militant, but you've described her as not being shy about butting in when she thought it was appropriate. Did she ever butt in and say that you lack independence, or that you had predetermined the decision just as it's been put to you today?
No.
Thank you. I have nothing further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now, the witnesses can leave if they want to, but if they want to remain, you're perfectly willing to, welcome to remain. But please go back to your seat. Your next witness,
yes,
please,
if I
Mr.
could
Frew.
call, sir, please, Rachel Salome. If you remain standing there, please, Ms. Salome.
And I gather you wish to affirm as well. And will please read the words on the card.
I, Rachel Salome, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And can you confirm your name and the professional address is fine?
It's Rachel Salome and the address is the store address on Raffle Court Road.
Yes, I've already got that from the previous witness. Thank you very much. Please sit down. Over to you, Mr. Frew.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Salome, did you have your witness statement before you?
Yes.
It's at page 68 of the bundle. Looking at your witness statement, you haven't signed the signature area at page 70, but can you, in relation to the content, can you confirm that the content is yours, please?
Yes.
It's true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
And you're happy for it to be used as part of your evidence today?
Yes.
So I do not have any supplementary questions, but I wonder if, just like the previous witness, this witness could read out her witness statement.
Yes,
short
well,
as
if
it
you
is.
could sign a copy of that statement and I'll take it at the end. So sign it and then
Right,
read it out to
sign
me.
this copy here.
That's right.
Yes.
And again, so I'm going to ask this witness to start from paragraph 2, given that you've got the name and address.
I've been asked to provide a witness statement in relation to an incident that took place in my store on the 1st of April 2017 when the claimant Tina Leaf was apprehended whilst trying to steal a large quantity of computer games from the store by secreting them within the box of a buried super smooth silky iron. During the week that the incident occurred, our super smooth silky iron, which was scheduled to be replaced with an updated model in the near future, had been discounted. I remember that on the morning of the 1st of April 2017, I bumped into Tina in the vicinity of an electrical goods cage in the warehouse storage area of the supermarket. I asked Tina what she was doing and she said that she was looking to put one of the irons that had been discounted aside in order that she could purchase it at the end of her shift. I was a little taken aback by this, although it is not completely unheard of for a member of staff to ask to do this when we have a particularly good offer on and dependent upon stock levels, which we may allow them to do so. It was clear that if I hadn't have found her, Tina would have never have asked for my permission. As a result of this, it certainly crossed my mind that she might have been up to no good. As it happened, I was aware that we had an identical iron returned by a customer the previous day, but that the box was rather damaged and that the instructions were missing, such that we would not be able to place it on the shop floor or resell it to the public. It occurred to me that if Tina was prepared to buy the returned iron, we would still be able to sell the other iron that she'd been looking to put to one side. I mentioned the return iron to Tina and indicated that I would be prepared to let her have that one with an additional 15% discount if she wanted it. She indicated that she would be interested, so I went to the customer service desk in order to retrieve the returned iron in its damaged box. This took me a little while, and it was probably about 10 minutes or so before I returned to the warehouse storage area with it. Tina was still waiting by the electrical goods cage, and I gave her the iron and then went back to work. Once they have finished their shift, staff are able to purchase items, they can do this in one of three ways. They can either go through one of the regular tills, or by self-scanning and paying for items at the customer service desk, or finally by scanning at one of the designated self-scan checkouts. During the course of the afternoon, my encounter with Tina earlier in the day began to prey increasingly on my mind. I don't know whether it was some sort of sixth sense, but I couldn't get the thought out of my head that something wasn't quite right. As a result of the unease that I was feeling, towards the end of Tina's shift, I took the decision to call Wendy Williams, who was the checkout captain on shift. I cannot remember exactly what I said to Wendy, but the gist of it was that if a weight discrepancy showed up on an electrical item that was going through one of the self-scan tills, then she should check and if necessary open the box. A short while later, I was informed that Tina had been apprehended at the self-scan tills as a weight discrepancy had shown up as she had attempted to scan the box, which purportedly contained the iron. It was subsequently discovered upon opening the box that it contained 30 copies of the Call of Duty game that had been released earlier that week. The game retails at £50, and so the total value of the items hidden within the box was some £1,500. I find it extremely difficult to believe that if Tina was, as she claimed, unaware of the fact that the games were hidden inside the box, that she would have not immediately realised that something was wrong when she picked up the box. The weight and feel of a box containing 30 computer games would obviously be totally different to the weight and feel of a box containing an iron. In my opinion, she was fully aware of the contents of the box at the time that she went to the self-scan checkout. I understand that within her disciplinary hearing, the claimant attempted to suggest that I had set her up because I was jealous of her getting male attention. While the second part of the comment is typical of Tina, who seems to have a very inflated opinion of her own looks, it is utterly preposterous to suggest that I would do this. I think it was simply a brazen attempt by Tina to try to deflect the blame in circumstances when she knew what she had done and that she'd been caught red-handed. For the avoidance of doubt, I can confirm that at the time that I handed the box to Tina on the morning of 1st of April 2019, to the best of my knowledge, it did contain the iron that had been returned by the customer the previous day. Whilst I did not open the box, certainly the weight of the box was consistent with that being its content. Certainly as far as Tina's allegation against me is concerned, I did not remove the iron myself or place copies of the Call of Duty game within the box prior to giving it to her. That would actually have been utterly nonsensical. The game had only been released that week and was in extremely high demand. As a result, we needed to have as many copies of the game on the shop floor as possible. It would have been entirely counterproductive to keep 30 copies of the game from sale simply in order to try and set up the claimant, and I categorically did not do so.
Thank you, Ms Salome. If you wait there will be some questions for you, no doubt.
Yes, Mr. Hurd.
Thanks, sir. Good morning, Ms Salome.
Good morning.
It's right, isn't it, that back in March of 2017 you attended training given by Ms Hangham at head office?
Yes.
And Ms Hangham describes you as having been very diligent at that training and that you took copious notes of what the training was on.
Yes, I did. I take my role very seriously, and training was very helpful, so I took loads of notes.
You were very interested in the training which was given, which included all the ways that colleagues and customers may try to steal from the stores.
Yes.
Didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
And that was information that you obtained and learned about at that hearing, which you deployed on the 1st of April against Miss Leaf by trying to set her up, didn't you?
No, I used the knowledge that I had gained to put a stop to Miss Leaf attempting to do the very things that we'd learnt about in the training.
In fact, since Miss Leaf's dismissal, you've been bragging about setting her up, haven't you, outside of work?
Definitely not, no.
You've been bragging about how you've been on a course to learn about how to steal from the store, haven't you?
No, that's not true.
On the 1st of April last year, there was a conversation with you and Miss Leaf, and it's right, isn't it, that everyone did what Miss Leaf was doing, i.e. taking a discounted item or an item they wanted to purchase from the supermarket, putting it to one side and then purchasing it after their shift. That was common practice, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't common practice. People would ask, and dependent on stock levels, it would potentially be allowed, but only if it had gone through management first.
In your witness statement, at the end, you make reference to not removing the iron and placing copies of Call of Duty in that box, and you say it would have been nonsensical. The game had only been released. It would have been counterproductive to keep 30 copies of the game from sale, simply in order to try to set the claimant up. From what you say in your statement, is it right that you are very conscious and target-driven, that you want your store to make as many sales as possible?
Yes, I think so.
And for your store to make as much money as possible?
Yes.
So why did you consider it necessary to add a further discount to the toaster than the 15% that the claimant had found with her originally sourced toaster?
Because it was an iron, actually, because
Beg pardon.
because the iron couldn't be sold on the shop floor because the box had already been damaged and the instructions removed. So we had to make a decision either to lose a potential sale or get a sale at albeit a very discounted price. So actually, I was actually making money for the store because we had a sale rather than no sale at all.
Well, you didn't have to add an extra discount on that iron, did you?
No, but I did that as a gesture of kindness towards Miss Lee.
Well, you wanted her to accept your offer because you wanted to give her an incentive to accept that iron, because your opportunistic plan was to set her up with these Call of Duty games, wasn't it?
Just not true, no.
It's right, isn't it, that when you gave the claimant the iron in the box that you obtained from the customer service desk, that you had, or the box was already resealed when you gave it to the claimant, wasn't it?
Yes.
So on your evidence, you gave her the iron, the box was resealed, and then the claimant went into the cage area, and on your case, you must be saying, well, it was at that moment that she took out the iron and put the games in the box.
I believe that's what she did. Obviously, she can potentially tell you what she actually did, but that's my belief, that during the 10 minutes that she was in the cage, she had ample opportunity to do that.
So on that logic then, within the cage area during those 10 minutes, the claimant must have had access to tape and scissors, firstly to open the box and then reseal it with the Call of Duty games.
Yes.
Well, that's simply implausible, isn't it?
I don't know why that would be implausible. It's perfectly reasonable to have scissors and tape in there.
Well, this is an area which is full of electrical goods, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, as part of your setup, you had to prime the security guard, Mr. Lag, and also the checkout captain, Wendy Williams, didn't you?
I didn't have to prime them. I told them that I was very suspicious something wasn't sitting right, and asked them to check any weight discrepancies by opening the items.
So it's being put as a setup. It's not accepted. Clearly, it was a setup. I would just ask you if you could ask my learned friend to calm down with the way in which he's asking questions.
Sir?
Well, I don't think there's anything improper in the way he's asking witness questions, and we've got about another 10 minutes before we go in for lunch. So carry on, please, Mr. Hurd.
Grateful, sir. So you make reference to this sixth sense that you had, that something wasn't quite right.
Yes.
Now, if that's true, and we say it isn't, this was all part of you setting up the claimant, and you had to line Wendy Williams and Jeremiah Lag up to catch her out. But if that is true, that you had some sort of sixth sense, wouldn't the obvious thing to have done to have you and security to have gone to the cage area and to have looked for the box yourself?
It was only, I was thinking about it during the day, and the suspicion was building and building, so I didn't necessarily think of it as suspicious as much at the time. It was only afterwards, when I thought about the length of time she had been in there, that just something seemed odd.
So Wendy Williams says that you phoned her, contacted her at 4:15. Jeremiah Lag, security guard, says you contacted him about 4 p.m. You're saying just before 4 p.m. you thought, uh-oh, something isn't right here. I need to contact, first of all, checkout captain and security.
Yes, if they're the times that are there, yes.
Really, Miss Salome, even if you thought that, then wouldn't the obvious step for you to take have been, even at that stage, to go back to the cage with security and investigate that there?
I just did, that didn't cross my mind.
Well, it did cross your mind because in the sense that you couldn't go back to the cage with security, because then you would have been exposing yourself to a setup, wouldn't you?
Don't follow.
Well, if the claimant is caught out at the till where it appears that you've had no involvement, then that puts the spotlight on the claimant much more than you, doesn't it?
I don't agree with you, no.
And the whole purpose behind your attempts to, and successful attempts to set up the claimant, was because you resented her because she was, in your mind, a more attractive female than you.
Oh, that's just ridiculous.
So those are my questions. Thanks. I don't have.
Yes, I just want to be clear from you. You're suggesting that this witness at some point removed an iron from its box and substituted that with the Call of Duty games,
Yes.
and then handed it to your client. Well, when are you suggesting that she actually did that? If you can be a bit more clear on that and put a specific time or opportunity, do so. But if you can't,
Absolutely.
at least we know what your case is.
If I then put this to Ms. Salome. Ms. Salome, could you turn up page 44, please? And that's the summary of the CCTV footage. We can see, can't we, at 10:56, I think that reads on my copy, at 10:56, claimant arrives at the cage with a roll pallet of GM electrical products. You and her have a discussion, you left, and the claimant waited at the cage. Now, you were away for 10 minutes, weren't you, before you returned to the cage area?
Yes.
Now, during that period, you went to the customer services desk, didn't you?
Yes.
And that's when you either took the box that had already contained the Call of Duty games in it, or you replaced the iron in that box with the Call of Duty games, did you?
No, it's quite a distance to walk from the cage to customer service. Then I had to collect the box and then walk all the way back. So no, that's just how long it took.
So I hope that assists.
Thank you very much. Any re-examination?
Please, I didn't intend to so until this last piece of evidence. So staying with this, please, Ms. Salome, and looking at page 44. There's a 10-minute period, 10:56 to 11:06. Yes? That's a period of 10 minutes. In that period, you, on the basis of this document, which is unchallenged as I understand it, have spoken with the claimant.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
How long did you speak to the claimant for, would you say, in your evidence?
A couple of minutes.
Couple of minutes. So we're going from 10 minutes to 8 minutes.
Yes.
Next question. From the area that you were in, how long would you estimate that it takes you to get to the customer services area where you collected the box?
Again, a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes.
Thank you. So we're now at 6 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
yes? The customer services area, is that populated with other members of staff, or was it on the 1st of April?
Yes, it's always
was.
a busy area.
How many people were there, if you can recall, please?
I don't remember specifically, but there would at least be one member of staff behind the desk, and potentially 2.
Do you recall speaking to anybody or doing anything other than collecting the box?
I had to explain to them I was just collecting the iron, and it was just sort of a general 2 seconds, here I'm just collecting this, and explaining that I wasn't just there for a chat, I was just there to collect the iron.
Yes, and could you estimate how long that took?
30 seconds.
30 seconds, and then the return journey in order to meet with the claimant?
Again, 2 or 3 minutes.
2 or 3 minutes. So the exchange of the 30 games would involve, on my learned friend's account, opening the box,
Mm-hmm.
taking the actual item out of the box,
Mm-hmm.
replacing it with 30 games, and you did that in a number of minutes. Did you?
No, I'd also potentially have to hide the iron also, if that argument is true, or also walk in with the iron in my hand, which I clearly didn't.
Yes. And as far as you're aware, was it ever... no, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you. That's your case, is it, Mr. Frew?
It is, sir. Thank you.
Yes, well, we've done very well on time. It's 10:30. So we'll break for coffee now. I think, can I ask you to be back in here in 15 minutes, please?
So, yes.
With mobile phones off. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir.
Ready to proceed?
Please, can I call Miss Leaf, please?
I, Tina Leaf, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Please sit down, Miss Leaf, and can you tell me your full name and address, please?
Yes, my name is Tina Leaf and my address is 142 Whitfield Street, London.
Thank you. Mr. Hurd?
Thanks, sir. Miss Leaf, can you locate your witness statement, please?
Yes.
Do you have that?
Yes.
Does it go to 13 paragraphs in length?
Yes.
Is it your statement?
Yes.
Have you read the contents of that statement recently?
Yes.
Are they true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Please, could you read out aloud your witness statement From the beginning, please.
Okay, yes. My name is Tina Leaf. I was employed as a general assistant at Bury's Ruffle Court Road for 7 years. I've been unfairly dismissed, and I was dismissed for being female. In my 7 years loyal service, I have never faced disciplinary action. I have a completely clear record. I came to Bury straight from school. They were my life. I felt part of a big family, part of something special. I've really been let down. On the 1st of April 2017, I saw that an iron had been discounted. There were only a few of them left, so I thought I would hide it until the end of my shift. Colleagues are not allowed to buy stuff during their shifts, so it's very common if a good deal is put on a product to hide it until after the end of your shift. I decided to hide the iron in an electrical goods cage that had recently been delivered to the store. I knew that the boys would not get around to emptying it until after my shift. The cages are very large walk-in metal cages with a flat base on wheels. They take a lot of product and are packed in the distribution centres before being sent out to the stores. As I approached the cage, my general store manager, Rachel Salome, asked me what I was doing. I told her and she had a look at the iron. She said, "I've just had to process a customer return on one of these who complained that the instruction booklet was missing. I can let you have that one with an extra 15% off if you like." I said that would be great, and she took my unopened iron and disappeared back into the store. A short while later she returned with another iron. It was the same brand, only this time the box had been opened and rather crudely taped back down again. I didn't think anything of it, as Rachel had explained that it was a previously opened customer return. I took it into the cage and spent a few moments hiding it at the back. At the end of my shift, I went back to the cage. I popped inside and retrieved my box. It was just the same as I'd left it. I took it to the front of the store. I went to the customer service desk. If it's free, colleagues can self-scan and pay for items at the desk. It was busy though, so I thought I would walk down to the self-scans. I prefer those to the conveyor belt tills, as I just find them quicker. I was a bit worried though, because I knew that the instructions weren't in the box and that the self-scan machine might pick up a weight mismatch. I guess it made me nervous, and I don't like to cause a scene. By mistake, I scanned my iron and some lollies together, and a mismatch flagged up. Straight away, the checkout captain descended on me like a shot. She came out of nowhere. I think that she'd been primed to look out for and stop me. She was really rude and aggressive, and she tried to snatch my stuff. I got all in a fluster. I said it was a discounted iron as it had no instructions, but that it was not worth all of the bother. I said I'd just take it back to the customer services desk. As I walked back to the store, a security bloke jumped out from behind an aisle and grabbed my shopping. He snatched it so hard that it hurt my arms, and I said, "What are you doing?" He ripped open the box, and I was stunned at what was inside. I had no idea that the Call of Duty games were in the box. He started laughing and said, "You're nicked, love." He wouldn't listen. I said that I was a pacifist and I hated a war and I had no interest in computer games. He just kept laughing. He tugged me by my already sore elbow and frog marched me into a security room. It had no windows. He told me to wait in the room and he shut the door. I heard the lock turn. I was in a right state. I had my phone, so I was able to call nursery and ask them to look after my daughter until I got back. Each second that passed made me feel more and more on edge. I was losing my mind and I was really worried. I was in there for over an hour. All of a sudden, the deputy general store manager marched in. She said I couldn't see any evidence or documents and that I had to answer her questions. She was so in my face and quick fire, I couldn't even think of my own name, let alone what I was meant to say. At the end of the meeting, she suspended me and had me escorted out of the store. The next day, I received a letter telling me to come to a disciplinary hearing. It had some stuff attached, but I was too ill to even read any of it. I called Bury's and asked for an adjournment. I even got my GP to say just how bad I was. I couldn't think of my own name. Bury's gave a couple of weeks and then point blank refused to give me any more time. I wasn't well enough to attend, but I did so as I was so scared of losing my job. I tried to explain what had happened. I tried to say that the general store manager, Rachel Salome, had stitched me up. I'm prettier than her and she hates it when staff beneath her get all the attention off the blokes. I know she had it in for me. I've heard from a friend that still works there that Rachel was bragging about how she'd gone on a course all about how to steal from the store and she'd set me up. I tried to explain this to the really horrid woman that did the disciplinary, but she wouldn't listen to a word that I said. My union rep asked some really good questions and said that she wanted my hearing adjourned and an investigation started into the general store manager. All of this fell on deaf ears. It's clear that Miss Hangham never did investigate any of what my union rep asked her to. Her decision came just a few hours later. It was really unfair. Both my union rep and I were disgusted at how unfair she'd been. We both felt an appeal would be a waste of time. I'm in a terrible situation now. I've not been able to find a job since. I applied to another supermarket, but Berries told them that I'd been dismissed for stealing. My daughter and I are really struggling. Her dad left us both for a squaddie called Colin. My world has collapsed. My GP said that I'm really ill and it's because of what Berries did to me. I really need your help. I'm the victim here and I'm in a really bad way.
Now, you haven't signed your statement yet, so there's a pen there. Can you sign that statement if that's correct?
Yes.
And so I can keep it with the file. Mr. Hurd, do you seek to put any supplemental questions?
I don't think very much.
Thank you. Mr. Fruit.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Leaf, I want to begin by looking at your GP's letter, which is at page 51. Turn to page 51 with me, please. Of course, this is a letter which was prepared in advance of the disciplinary hearing, isn't it?
Yes.
I just want to check that you're okay to continue today, because I appreciate that being cross-examined can be a stressful position to be in. Are you okay to continue?
Yes.
You are. And if you're not, I haven't asked for your permission, sir, but can I identify to the witness that should she need a break, she can indicate to you, sir?
Yes, and she's got her own representative as well.
I'm very grateful, sir. You see, one of the concerns that has been raised by your counsel is that during the course of the disciplinary meeting, a stressful meeting, no doubt, do you agree?
Yes.
You were feeling the effects of stress. You were represented by your trade union representative, yes?
Yes.
And you were able to continue with an offer of having breaks if you required a break, weren't you?
I was given the opportunity to have a break if it was needed, but at the start I wanted some more information. I didn't really have that much information about the evidence or any questions that had been asked of everybody else in the store, and I wasn't given that either at the hearing.
I'm not going to ask you any further questions about that, because that's not a point that's been raised by your counsel. Now, looking at the notes of the disciplinary meeting, do you agree that you were able to provide your version of events to the allegation?
I could provide them, but they weren't listened to.
That's a different matter, but you do accept that you were able to provide your version of events, yes?
Yes, but it was limited. I couldn't say everything that I wanted to say.
Well, looking at your witness statement, that is not limited, is it? Do you agree?
My witness statement is more detailed.
And you're
Yes.
able to put within your witness statement everything that you wish to put in defence to the allegation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And your witness statement doesn't go further, I'm going to put to you, than that which is recorded within the minutes of the disciplinary hearing. Do you agree?
No, I think my statement sets out more detail about what had happened, about why I was taking the iron and what I was doing, the fact that I was hiding it to collect it later and that was normal. And in the hearing I just felt like I was constantly being cut off and I couldn't explain myself properly, and there was a lot going on at one time. And
Thank you. Now, please turn with me to page 29 of the bundle. And before I ask you any questions about this landscape page, about your responsibilities and your security and searches. In the period of 7.5 years that you worked for the Respondent, you had seen people having, when I say people, I mean members of staff, being checked, hadn't you?
Occasionally.
Yes. And we can see, looking at page 29, that searches are part of a policy. Yes?
Yes.
And you were aware of that policy, weren't you?
I was, but the search that was conducted of me was very aggressive.
Please turn to page 33 of the bundle with me. This is an extract from the Respondent's disciplinary policy. Are you at page 33 with me, please?
Yes.
You can see that halfway down the page, approximately, in between the hole punches, there is a question asked, what is gross misconduct? You understand and understood what is meant by gross misconduct, didn't you?
Yes.
And looking at the first bullet point under the question, theft or attempted theft is considered capable of amounting to gross misconduct. Do you agree with that?
Yes, it's there.
Thank you. Now, you were suspended on the 1st of April. Turn to page 47 with me, please. And you received the letter at 47 confirming your suspension, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes. And you can see that the identification of the reason for your suspension is there. It involves alleged gross misconduct, namely the attempted theft of Berry's property. Yes?
Yes.
At this stage, you simply had no misunderstanding about the allegation that you were facing, did you?
I knew that they thought I tried to steal, but I hadn't done it. It wasn't me. I didn't put the games in the box. It was a setup, and I should never have been suspended in the first place.
Turn to page 41 with me, please. This is an inventory of returned items, and we can see that fourth from the bottom, the steam iron is a returned item. Yes?
Yes.
That is the same steam iron that you approached Ms. Salome about and entered into a conversation about on the 1st of April, isn't it?
Well, it's the same iron, but Mrs. Salome approached me about the iron that had been returned. I originally had a different iron that had been with the rest of the stock that I'd picked up. Miss Salome came up to me and told me that there was one that had been returned. I could have a further discount because there was the instruction booklet missing and the box was a bit damaged, and that was this iron.
Let me just see if you agree with this account. Turn to page 68 of the bundle. That's the witness statement of Rachel Salome, but please do keep your finger on 41. Look at paragraph 4 of Ms. Salome's witness statement, please.
Yes.
It states on the first line of that paragraph, I bumped into Tina in the vicinity of an electrical goods cage in the warehouse storage area in the supermarket. Do you agree with that so far?
Yes.
I asked Tina what she was doing, and she said that she was looking to put one of the irons that had been discounted aside in order to purchase it at the end of her shift. Yes? You were looking for the same iron. By coincidence, that iron had been returned. That seems to be uncontroversial. You agree, yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, moving on, turn to page 42 with me, please. We have the statement of Wendy Williams, which was taken. Have you got it?
Yes.
And she provides an account, and it's the second paragraph that I want to take you to. She identifies that she asked you if she could open the box as it had not weighed properly. Do you agree with that?
It was more of a demand than a request. She was very aggressive. She tried to take the box from me. She didn't really ask.
She then goes on to say that you refused to let her open it. Can you see that?
Yes.
And that's correct, isn't it? You did refuse to let her open it.
Yes, but why would I let her open my shopping?
You then said that it was the ice lollies that had caused the error. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And what you did, you can see the account of Wendy Williams provides, is that you pulled the box away from her and said that she had intimidated you and it was not worth the hassle. Yes?
Yes.
What were you referring to, and why didn't you let her have the box?
It just seemed like getting an iron with an extra discount was more hassle than it was worth. So I decided that I wasn't going to bother, and I was going to just take it back to customer services desk, and I would just take the rest of my shopping. I'd pick up an iron at another time. And with her opening the box, I didn't know why she wanted to. There was no explanation of why she wanted to open the box, what she was doing. It was all... She was really intimidating and she was really aggressive, and I got really flustered, and it just felt like it wasn't worth it, and the easiest thing to do to get myself out of the horrible situation at the tills in front of everybody was to just put the iron back. So that's what I went to do.
Please recall your evidence a moment ago where you accept that you were aware of the policy about searches and that you've also seen other people being searched during the course of your employment. Yes?
Yes.
Why was it such a shock to you that given there's a policy, given other people are searched, you were being searched?
I know that it's the policy and I know that other people were searched, but nobody else was searched in the same way. She was just so aggressive about it, and I'd never seen anybody be searched like that. It was almost as if she was looking for something. And
given that you were trying to get away, you were stating that it wasn't worth the hassle, you wouldn't give Ms. Williams the box. Can you understand how, reading that alone, somebody could have a reasonable belief that you were up to no good? Whether you were or not, a reasonable belief that there's something was going on that wasn't quite right. Do you accept that at the very least?
I accept it. It doesn't look brilliant, but I was just flustered and I didn't know what to do, and in the moment I just panicked, and I didn't want to deal with all of the stress of that, so I changed my mind and I just decided that I wouldn't take the iron.
So on that evidence alone, you accept that it does not look brilliant. Let's have a look at page 43. That's the statement of Mr. Jeremiah Lagg. We can see, have you got it? Next
Yes.
page. We can see in the first paragraph that he watched the CCTV as you approached the self-scan area, having passed 3 manned conveyors and no queues. And that's what you did, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. He then identifies that he watched the checkout captain approach you and try and open the box. That's the evidence of Ms. Williams, isn't it? Yes?
Yes.
And he goes on to state that you wouldn't let her look at the box and you instead turned and took the box back into the store. You actually, perhaps not ran away, but you wanted desperately to get away with the box, didn't you?
I was taking it back. I changed my mind. It was causing me way more hassle than it should, and it wasn't worth it. So I decided I was going to take it back into the store and put it back behind the customer service desk.
He states in the second paragraph that you were heading down aisle 20 toward the direction of the loading area. That's what you were doing, wasn't it?
So I didn't go directly to the customer service desk, but I wasn't going back to the loading area either. I was taking the box back to the customer service. I was just taking it back, and I was flustered, and so maybe I didn't go the most direct route, but I was just returning it.
So just going to stop you there again and ask you the same question that I did in regard to Ms. Williams' evidence. Do you accept that, objectively, at the very least, to use your phrase, it did not make you look brilliant?
Yes.
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 Do you accept, I'll ask again, that to an objective observer, they could have a reasonable belief that you were in actual fact trying to get away with the box in a suspicious way? Do you accept that?
If I was trying to get away from the box and just get out of the store, why would I not just, I don't know, make a break for it or something? I went back into the store with the box to return it.
You did make a break for it. That's my very point.
I
But I'll ask
didn't.
my question again. That wasn't quite my question. I'll try one more time. Do you accept that somebody could have a reasonable belief that you were acting in a suspicious way that didn't look brilliant?
Yes.
Let's carry on with the evidence of Mr. Lagg. And look at the third paragraph. He was told to write up the CCTV footage. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes. Now, turn over the page. We have that write-up, page 44, please. Can you confirm
Yes.
that you've got that, please, Miss Lee?
Yes.
Now, you've heard the evidence of Miss Salome already this morning, haven't you?
Yes.
And about the timings in regard to her putting these games into the box. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Yes? Do you accept that it is highly unlikely that she could have done that, both in the timing and with an audience?
No.
Okay. Look at the times that you were out of sight whilst in the cage of electrical goods. That's against the time of 11:07. Have you got it?
Yes.
Took you 16 minutes to emerge from the cage without the box. Yes?
Yes.
In that time, you could have done exactly as your counsel has suggested, Miss Salome has, replaced the legal item with the illegal items. Do you accept that somebody could have a reasonable belief that you could have done that in 16 minutes? I'm not asking whether you did it. That's not the question for this tribunal.
Yes, somebody could think that I had done something like that.
You attended an investigation meeting on the 1st of April, didn't you?
Yes.
Yes. We've got the minutes of that investigation meeting on page 45. Turn to page 45 with me, please.
Yes.
I will be interrupted if I'm wrong, I have no doubt. You do not mention Miss Salome at all in this investigation in the way in which you do rely upon today, do you? There is no suggestion that because you are prettier than her, She's set you up. Is there?
No, it's not there, but I'd been kept in a room for an hour. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what to expect, and it hadn't even... I was so worried, and I was worried about my daughter and what was happening, that I was flustered, and maybe I should have mentioned it then, but I didn't, and I was just in a panic.
You weren't in such a panic that you were able to put your story forward, were you? The actual story, fresh in your mind at the time.
Well, I was able to say what had happened with scanning the box and returning it.
But it didn't come to you that the very serious allegation that became an allegation of sex discrimination was present in your mind at that time.
Not initially. I thought that maybe Rachel Salome was just doing something nice for me, but the more I thought about it, the more I realised that maybe she wasn't.
Now, in the same vein that you didn't look brilliant so far, do you accept that somebody could have a reasonable belief that you had manufactured that reason after the event to defend yourself? Not that you did that, but they could form a reasonable belief that you had done that. Do you accept that?
Yes.
You attended, eventually, a disciplinary hearing on the 25th of April. Turn to page 53 with me, please. You've confirmed that you were represented.
Yes. Turn to page 57 with me, please. When Ms. Hangham states in the large paragraph toward the bottom of page 57, 4 lines up or 4 boxes up, have you got that? RH and it starts right. Yes? If you go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th line of that box, it starts, you had an hour. Can you see that? Yes.
Before the investigation meeting to get your facts straight. I just think it's even too fanciful to explore any further. Can you see that?
Yes.
But this is in relation to the suggestion that you made within the disciplinary hearing. You've accepted that there could be a reasonable belief that you'd manufactured that story, haven't you?
Yes.
Turn to page 58 with me, please. This is the manager's checklist. Have you got it?
Yes.
And we can see that the concerns are set down, factors against disciplinary action. Can you see that? So the box at the bottom,
Yes.
just before the signatures, and we've got factors against disciplinary action. Yes?
Yes.
So long, meaning long service, do you accept that?
Yes.
Clear prior disciplinary record? Yes?
Yes.
Do you accept that Miss Hangham, at least recorded mitigating factors such as your clean record and your long service of 7.5 years prior to making her decision?
I accept that she recorded them, but she's also recorded that it could have been a setup. But then she's not investigated that as a possibility. She's written it.
You received the outcome letter. That's at page 59.
Yes.
You were offered a right of appeal.
Yes.
Page 60. You didn't take that right of appeal, did you?
No.
No further questions. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yes. I think I just got one question, Miss Leaf, before there's any re-examination. In page 61,
Yes.
in paragraph 3 of your witness statement, you say in the second sentence, colleagues are not allowed to buy stuff during their shifts. So it's very common if a good deal is put on a product, to hide it until after the end of your shift. I decided to hide the iron in an electrical goods cage that had recently been delivered to the store. I knew that the boys would not get round to emptying it until after my shift. When did you expect the contents of that cage to be emptied?
Probably quite late on in the day, evening, maybe even the next day. When everything comes in, we get large deliveries, and so not everything that comes in, like the electrical cages, gets cleared that day. You focus on clearing, the like food, perishable goods, but non-perishable things we leave, especially when we're busy. And because I knew that there was a lot of other stuff that needed unloading first, I knew that this wouldn't get done until the evening or maybe even the next day.
Okay, yeah. That's the only additional question I had, Mr. Hurd. Have you got any re-examination?
I don't, thank you.
Right. Miss Leaf, that's your evidence, so you can leave the witness table. Thank you very much, and resume your seat. So we now come to the closing submissions. So you started with your case, so it's for you to start with your submissions first, and then Mr. Frew can answer. But if you do need to have the last a response, I'm happy to hear from you. If you want to, again, Mr. Hurd. So, Mr. Hurd, are you ready to give your submissions now? Okay.
So making submissions on the unfair dismissal case first. Of course, it's the respondent's burden to show that there's a potentially fair reason, conduct is a potentially fair reason. Now, the claimant does not dispute that conduct was the reason for dismissal, nor does the claimant dispute that the respondent had a genuine belief in misconduct. However, of course, you'll be bearing in mind the well-established Birchall principles, and so you'll be considering, of course, whether there were reasonable grounds to conclude that there was misconduct in this case, and the reasonable grounds to believe that the claimant was guilty. And at that time that that belief in guilt was reached, whether there had been a reasonable investigation. And of course, the range of reasonable responses test applies to those two considerations. As a headline, I submit that the investigation conducted by the respondent was woefully inadequate and outside of that range of reasonable investigations, which fed into and tainted the reasonable grounds criterion, and therefore caused the respondent to have no reasonable grounds to conclude that the claimant was guilty of misconduct. Now, picking up with the investigation first, the situation, I submit, is clearly that any reasonable employer would have investigated, spoken to Miss Salome prior to reaching any decision on the claimant's guilt. And to any reasonable employer, it should have been obvious that Miss Salome was a relevant witness in this case, because we heard from the dismissing officer, Miss Hangham, that before she even conducted the disciplinary hearing, she was aware of the CCTV footage summary, page 44 of the bundle, and was aware that RS was referring to Rachel Salome. So any reasonable employer looking at this, who had to decide upon the claimant's guilt, would have seen from the CCTV summary that Rachel Salome would necessarily be a relevant witness and would likely and bound to have something to say. Yet, even at the outset, before any disciplinary hearing, there was no investigation of her. It was something that should have taken place. And it's inexcusable, and I say woefully inadequate, that there was no investigation of Rachel Salome after the disciplinary hearing. We heard from Ms. Hangham that she could have, in her mind, investigated as a possibility, but chose not to, because it was so blatant, I submit, after Ms. Hangham became aware of the claimant's case, that this was a set-up, and that it was Ms. Salome's, and Ms. Salome was doing the set-up. Obviously, any reasonable investigation within a range of reasonable investigations would have required Ms. Salome to have been spoken to for the claimant's case to have been tested. Yet, Ms. Salome wasn't spoken to at all. So I say that fundamental failure takes the investigation outside the range of reasonable investigations. But not only for that reason. I submit that given what the claimant was saying about how Wendy Williams, the checkout captain, conducted herself when the claimant went through the self-scanner, and also how Mr. Lagg conducted himself, those were two witnesses that should have been spoken to after the disciplinary hearing and after the claimant had explained how their behaviour had influenced her behaviour. Because, of course, it was held against the claimant that it was that her behaviour was seen as being suspicious. Yet, were the claimant correct in how Ms. Williams and Mr. Lagg behaved, then it wouldn't have been suspicious behaviour. It would have been behaviour that would have been explained as behaviour that was caused by their aggressive handling of the situation and the claimant. Yet that investigation of Ms. Williams and Mr. Lagg, as I submit, never happened. So for those reasons, in addition or separately, caused the investigation to be outside the range of reasonable investigations. So that failure to conduct a reasonable investigation necessarily taints the reasonable grounds criterion, and for that reason, I submit that a known reasonable employer would have had reasonable grounds to conclude that the claimant was guilty of this charge. Of course, so applying Section 98(4) of the Employment Rights Act 1996, you've got to give consideration to all the circumstances and determine whether in all the circumstances this dismissal was fair. And I submit that there were further fundamental flaws in the fairness of the claimant's dismissal. Firstly, I submit that it's clear that Ms. Hangham approached her role as disciplining officer with a predetermination of the claimant's guilt. She approached this, I say, with a closed mind. And that is supported by the fact of the language that was used by Ms. Hangham in the disciplinary hearing. For example, what is telling, I say, is that Ms. Hangham expressed in response to the claimant's health that even though the claimant's representative was saying that the claimant wasn't well, Ms. Hangham was saying, well, my mind is made up. So my point is that Ms. Hangham was saying her mind was made up about whether or not to postpone the hearing again. She'd made her mind up before the hearing that she wouldn't. That way of dealing with that issue, I say, is suggestive that that's how Ms. Hangham dealt with the decision on the claimant's guilt. She had already made her mind up before the hearing. Similarly, a disciplining officer who is open-minded and wants to hear what the claimant has to say doesn't shut down a claimant when they're trying to get their version of events out. And I took Ms. Hangham to page 54, and where Ms. Hangham interrupted the claimant, where the claimant at the top, 4 lines down, said, I understand, but I would like more, and then Ms. Hangham interrupted. It is, I submit, a situation whereby clearly the claimant didn't have the opportunity to present her full case, which is indicative itself of Ms. Hangham predetermining the issue. And you heard evidence given by the claimant in cross-examination that there's more that she wanted to say. That is supported clearly from the minutes of the disciplinary hearing. So, in addition to the predetermination, closed-mindedness of the decision-maker, Ms. Hangham, I submit there's a further aspect of unfairness, and that is that this hearing should have been postponed because the claimant was not well. I invite you to find on the balance of probabilities that the claimant was not well. We have a recorded entry on page 53, 4 lines up from the bottom, that Mrs. Tant said it's pretty bloody clear she's not well. Ms. Hangham said in her cross-examination evidence that she thought the claimant presented as well. I submit on the balance of probabilities, particularly given the claimant's GP letter, 51, which puts the claimant in a very bad way, I submit, that as a matter of fact she wasn't well, and for those reasons the disciplinary hearing should have been adjourned to a later date. There would be no disadvantage to the respondent. It wasn't even 1 month since the particular charge, and that would have been proper and fair in the circumstances. A further aspect of unfairness is that Ms. Hangham had evidence about Miss Salome which would have assisted the claimant's case. So she was a witness of fact, yet one, didn't recuse herself of sitting as the disciplining officer, but 2, never told the claimant about Ms. Salome attending the training in 2017 and being, my words, an avid note taker of everything that was being presented in that presentation about how to steal products from the respondent's store. And the reason why that would have been of assistance to the claimant's case is, as I put to the witness, Ms. Hangham, in cross-examination, that it gave Ms. Salome the know-how of how to steal products, and therefore gave her the know-how of how to set the claimant up. I submit further that this case was unfair because Ms. Hangham didn't consider any alternatives to dismissal. You heard from her that in all cases of theft there's an instance that there'll be an automatically there'll be a dismissal. Well, I submit that failure to consider alternatives necessarily makes the claimant's dismissal unfair. So that's what I submit in respect of the unfair dismissal claim. In respect of the wrongful dismissal claim, well, of course, you have a different role. Rather than looking at the evidence that was presented to the respondent and determining whether their decisions were reasonable, you can put yourself in the position of making the determination yourself on the evidence before you. And I submit that you can be satisfied on balance that the claimant's version of events can be preferred over the respondent's, and that the claimant gave better evidence than the respondent's witnesses, and that she was a credible, consistent and reliable witness. An employee who was employed for 7.5 years with a clean disciplinary record. She was a loyal employee. I submit, know that Ms. Salome had the know-how and she had the opportunity to set the claimant up. And Ms. Salome's case simply doesn't add up, I say. Ms. Salome made reference to the sixth sense. I submit that the obvious thing for someone to do, if she truly had this sixth sense, was to go to the cage area with security and to look for the box. But of course she couldn't do that, because then she'd be opening herself up to the allegation that she had set the claimant up. She needed to look like she was not involved in that setup, and that's why she tipped off the two witnesses, the security guard and Miss Williams, to look for precisely the item that she knew would not weigh correctly because there was a missing instruction manual. So for all those reasons, I invite you to find that the claimant's claims for unfair dismissal and wrongful dismissal succeed.
Yes, and if I'm with you on the unfair dismissal, on the procedure, what do you say would have happened if they had carried out a fair procedure? Seems fairly clear that if they'd have actually taken the opportunity to interview Rachel Salome, she would have said the same that she said today. Do you accept that, or what would you say on this Polky argument?
So I submit that even had a fair procedure have taken place, Miss Salome were interviewed, then still I submit that the necessary virtual tests would not have been satisfied on the evidence, and that therefore there should be no Polky reduction. And I echo those submissions in respect of any consideration for whether the claimant contributed to her dismissal.
Thank you. Mr. Frew.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I've noted the concessions made by the claimant during the course of her cross-examination. That enables me to be relatively brief in my submission.
Well, does it? Because I know that she did concede that, a reasonable person could have thought this was suspicion. A reasonable person could have concluded.
I appreciate it's your decision,
that's
sir.
her opinion. It's a judgment for me.
Of course,
don't feel as though you can simply not make any submissions on that. It's
certainly won't do
entirely
that,
for you, but it's a decision for me.
I understand, sir. Sir, I agree with my learned friend to the extent that we are looking at the Birchall test in regard to the unfair dismissal allegation. The claimant accepts that, quite rightly, alleged theft is an allegation of gross misconduct, capable of amounting to gross misconduct. The next concern that she raises is the reasonableness of the investigation. Now, there seems to be two factors, but the primary factor of concern raised by my learned friend is that Miss Salome was not considered for evidence at that time. That is seemingly put forward on the basis that that is fatal to the process and renders it unfair. So, of course, my submission is that it must be accepted that it is simply not axiomatic for an investigating officer or indeed a disciplinary officer to investigate every line of defence put forward by an employee, the claimant in this circumstance. We can see the line of investigation that was being sought by the questions put forward by Ms. Tant on behalf of the claimant. We can see the position that was provided by Ms. Salome within her witness statement. My submission, sir, is that given that it's not a forensic exercise carried out by the disciplinary officer, in those circumstances it was entirely fair and reasonable for her not to ask, for example, of Miss Salome, how many people, I think the question is, who are prettier than her have been dismissed or affected somehow. It's ridiculous in the circumstances, I say, sir. And the only answer that would inevitably have been provided is that answer within Ms. Salome's witness statement of, no, I did not set up the claimant. Now, any analysis, I say, sir, in my submission of this apparent setup simply doesn't bear any level of scrutiny. The timing of Miss Salome apparently placing the games into the box doesn't fit, and she had an audience of where she is meant to have carried out that illegal exercise doesn't fit. The motivation for it is, sir, I'm afraid I'm going to use further strong language, nonsense. To the extent that, quite rightly, the claimant has withdrawn her allegation, serious as it is, of sex discrimination.
Well, I don't think I can take the fact that she's decided on advice with her counsel not to pursue a separate cause of action, of making any kind of concession as a matter of fact in relation to the unfair dismissal, because no express concession has been made.
I accept that, sir. What we do have, still in the evidence of the claimant, in her opening paragraph of her witness statement is, I was dismissed for being female. That seems to be maintained as her primary reason of unfairness, that she was female. That hasn't been changed by my learned friend, it hasn't been changed by the claimant. In no circumstances, sir, I maintain that the suggestion that's put forward in regard to Miss Salome is a nonsense, be it on the basis of a sex discrimination claim, direct sex discrimination as it was, or indeed as a motivation for the dismissal of this claimant. So, I say that there was a reasonable investigation, sir, in the circumstances. not taken on a forensic basis and on the basis that it must be accepted that it's not axiomatic that an officer of the respondent has to investigate every line of defence put forward by an employee. If we then move on, sir, it's accepted certainly by obviously a key player in this exercise, the claimant, that objectively somebody could have a reasonable belief that at the very least she was acting in a suspicious way and it doesn't make her look brilliant. I, in my submission, sir, take it further. There is an acceptance by the claimant that in the circumstances there is a reasonable belief that she is guilty of an attempted theft. Those reasons are set out, and I shan't repeat them, sir, within the disciplinary hearing outcome letter at page 59 and by Ms. Tant. Number 1 being, you spent 16 minutes in a cage. Starts with that. Those are the reasons, sir, as to why a reasonable belief has been achieved. Now, perhaps a red herring, sir, in your view, in my submission, undoubtedly a red herring, is the issue of the claimant's ill health. She did provide a GP letter, sir, identifying that she's incapable of attending work but not incapable of attending a disciplinary hearing. She was vigorously represented, apparently, by Ms. Tant at the disciplinary hearing. Her concern through her counsel is that she wasn't able to put forward her version of events. Well, we can test that thoroughly, sir, in my submission, because we can look at the contents of her witness statement. It takes it no further. She was able to put forward her side of the story. She was not affected by her ill health, actually, in the end. She did continue to carry on with the adjustment of having breaks if necessary. And ultimately, natural justice has been completely maintained in my submission. We then, sir, are left, only in regard to the unfair dismissal, with the sanction employed, that of course being summary dismissal. Well, the allegation is that mitigating circumstances were not taken into consideration. Well, they were, sir. We can see that at page 58. Length of service, clean prior record. But the evidence that Ms. Hangham provides is that it's inevitable in the circumstances of being caught red-handed, as the claimant was, that there was a dismissal. Not that it's an automatic automatic dismissal, summary, but in these circumstances. And to go beyond that, sir, is to identify potentially a substitution. And of course, we all avoid that in the Employment Tribunal on an unfair dismissal claim. Sir, in relation to Polkey, I would ask for a 100% reduction. We can enter what is sometimes a wide sea of speculation because we have the evidence of Ms. Salome. Nothing would have changed, the claimant would have been dismissed. I ask for a 100% reduction in compensation should you find that there was unfairness as a result of procedure. And the same for contribution, sir. We have, in circumstances which are simply unexplained, a claimant running away from security. She's not new to this process. She's seen it before. She's aware of the policy. She's running away because she's been caught red-handed. She has contributed by 100% to her own dismissal. The very fact that she is raising issues about Ms. Salome in the circumstances is disingenuous in my submission. That is conduct which contributes to her dismissal in my submission. And sir, if I could finish off the unfair dismissal, my submission on that with an acceptance that if you find that there wasn't gross misconduct in the circumstances, there's every ability to award notice in the circumstances if it were misconduct, for example. I'm aware, and I agree with my learned friend's proposition that the test is different. In the circumstances, the claimant was caught red-handed with the games.
And what is her notice period?
So it's statutory. There's 7 weeks in the
7 weeks.
circumstances.
Okay.
Those are my suspicions, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hurd, have you anything that you need to say by way of reply to what's just been said?
Not to come back on, so thank you.
No, I'm not surprised. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to have a break now and think about what my decision is, but I will give you a decision which I think I'll need at least 15 minutes. But when I'm ready, perhaps the court clerk will come and get me. Where are you? Ah, there you are. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong person. Right, thank you very much.
Now, here's your opportunity. You've got 2 barristers and a team of solicitors over there to ask questions about anything, okay? Don't keep it just to unfair dismissal, but to ask about this case, and let's see if we can get a prediction that's correct. So I understand you've got cards.
They've
Is that
got cards in your pack. Have you seen it? A yes or no card.
So I'm going to ask you to do this twice, okay? Let's do it unadulterated by anything that we say or you say. So can we have a show of hands? Are you ready? If you hold up no, it means that the respondent is successful in their defence of this unfair dismissal claim. If you say yes, the respondent is unsuccessful. Okay?
So yes, the claimant was unfairly dismissed.
Okay, let's hold them up. Unfairly dismissed. Big tranche up there, yes. A couple of no's, thank you. Well, I think it's going in the direction of the claimant being unfairly dismissed.
Quite like my chance.
So, any who wants to offer a view as to why, firstly, the claimant was unfairly dismissed?
Process was unfair.
Who said that? Was it you? In what way?
The investigatory meeting and then the disciplinary didn't go far enough and didn't consider all factors, should have taken further statements, should have looked into the information provided by the employee.
Right. So on that basis, what the law says is that the investigation has to be within a band of reasonable responses. Okay. So it doesn't have to. You don't have to investigate, and it's right. You don't have to look at it on a forensic basis. But there's another case. There's a number of cases, but one of them is X and Y, and that says it's got to be proportionate to the effect that this might have on the employee. So let's say you've got a teacher who's being disciplined for a sexual offence. You can probably identify that that's going to be the end of their career if they're dismissed. You need a heavy level of investigation into that, okay? You catch a council worker fly tipping, okay? Catch him on CCTV, you don't need so much investigation. This is going to end Miss Lee's career working in the retail industry, isn't it? She's been nabbed with 1,500 quid's worth of games. So, anybody else? Why will the claimant be successful? Why was she under? Yes?
So, at best, a reasonable belief is around having the actual products at the time of leaving, but we haven't really established whether it was her or Mrs. Delaney that switched the products, but also procedurally there's a few issues. So, at the time she's suspended, she's told it's potentially gross misconduct. When she's invited to disciplinary hearing, in the letter it's actually downgraded misconduct, which is obviously probably an error. But it could be argued that actually that could be grounds that it was no longer being considered as gross misconduct.
Yes.
So procedurally there are a few issues in terms of that.
Yes.
And then the disciplinary hearing itself doesn't look like she's been given a fair opportunity to provide her responses.
Yes.
So procedurally, there's quite a few errors.
Well, Ms. Hangham's behaviour in the... I was going to say it's hammed up. You actually do, perhaps not that bad, but you see some surprising levels of language in real life. But obviously, her behaviour is appalling, isn't it? It's attacking when, in actual fact, the process has to be even-handed. So, another thing to bear in mind is that when on the error, it would be put down as an error, I think, and be calling it misconduct. Yeah, gross misconduct. Is that judges can identify the reason for the dismissal. Okay, so they can change that type of thing. If you say, for example, I was dismissed for that reason, and it says that on paper, the judge can say, well, no, we think it's a fair dismissal, but the reason was for this reason. Okay, so it wouldn't actually affect, I don't think, the finding that it's something that you would attack during the course of it. Okay, why is the respondent going to win? Who put up a friendly yellow sign? Why is the respondent going to win?
I kind of was a bit like that. That's not get out clause. I think I looked at the steps taken at the investigation and disciplinary. Did they have a fair opportunity at any point to say, can we stop this? We don't feel we're able to continue. I don't think this is balanced. I don't think it's fair. I think he's swaying to one decision. So I think there was many touch points where either party, either the individual or the representative had challenge points to put forward. I think they listed their defence, and I think it goes back to what you said around at what point does it become a forensic investigation. We had a very difficult case many years ago which was in the police, and you're right, it was around a superintendent who effectively could lose his job. And we had to approach it like a full-on forensic investigation with many files of evidence to prove or disprove. So I kind of went through the touch points, opportunities to put forward a plea. Was the things put forward in terms of, you haven't considered this, was it reasonable to say, absolutely, if we consider that it's going to change the outcome? Yes. And it goes back to the virtual test on, at every point, did the investigator or the disciplinary officer have a reasonable belief that this potentially was a situation that had happened? Right. It is. But it could have gone the other way as well. I was a bit like,
Well, quite well. I think that's the whole way it's been pitched, I suppose. What do you understand the point about it being a reasonable belief on unfair dismissal? So the judge doesn't have to make a finding of the fact that she stole anything, or anybody does anything in the allegation. Just it's fairly low standard, a reasonable belief, and you know that, for example, in the criminal jurisdiction, it's beyond reasonable doubt. You've got to be sure. Very high standard. You know that in the civil jurisdiction, it's on the balance of probability, lower than being sure in crime. But in the employment tribunal, on unfair dismissal, it's the lowest, I think, of a reasonable belief. Did we all understand that prior to coming here today? Yes. Did anyone not have that? You maybe don't want to put your hand up.
I really understood the level that reasonableness is.
Yes. Yeah. And
understanding exactly what is reasonable.
Yes. Okay. All right. Now, I make a cheat point when I'm cross-examined. I do it all the time, in real life, frankly. By going to a claimant, okay, giving evidence, scared witness in a tribunal, an area that Jonathan and we're in there every day. Okay, so you've got an unfair advantage, but people are paying for that unfair advantage. And I get her to say, yes, I didn't look great.
Brilliant.
And I'm being bullied. In actual fact, it's irrelevant what she thinks, completely. But you've also got a judge who's a human being thinking, well, gosh, if she thinks it was fair enough in the circumstances, she obviously doesn't understand the virtual test. She doesn't understand the significance of a reasonable belief. I'm going to go with that, okay? So it is cheap. But it regularly wins cases. There you are, I continue to pay my mortgage. So, what about, do we know about substituting a tribunal substituting their view of the employer. Yes? So in short, it's that the tribunal can't say, well, look, we'd have given her a final written warning in the circumstances, okay? That's not the test. That's stepping into the decision-making shoes of the employer, which tribunals are not allowed to do, okay? It's not their decision. Tribunals only have the ability to consider the reasonableness of the approach that's been taken. Is it within, and this is talking about sanction, written warning, go and do some training, final written warning, dismissal with notice, summary dismissal, dismissal without notice. Was that within a band of reasonable responses? Okay, and the point that Jonathan makes is that Tina in real life, but Ms. Hangham says, well, it's automatic. By saying that, she puts a massive danger on the fairness of the decision, because it's not automatic. You must consider mitigation. Doesn't mean that you take the mitigation and reduce the sanction. You've just got to consider it, okay? Someone with 25 years service, when you're writing that dismissal letter or you're advising it if you're HR, you say, well, why don't you pop a paragraph in there about, we did consider your length of service, but in the circumstances, this is such a serious offence, that's why we've gone with the sanction of summary dismissal, okay? You need to take it into consideration. Tina could have said, well, I was being beaten to death by my husband or my partner, and I was forced into a circumstance where I was having to steal these games. I needed £1,500, or my family were going to starve to death. My dog hasn't eaten for a number of days now. I'm going to lose my house. That's why I'm stealing FIFA games, okay? Well, that's mitigation. You take it into consideration, but I don't care. You're still gone. All right? For example, if that's right. Okay? Now, what about Polky? Do we understand what Polky is? No. So that is, you can often get a claimant who... Well, Jonathan, do you want to explain Polky and contribution? They'll be sick of me.
Whenever a tribunal, if the tribunal decides that, for example, procedurally something's gone wrong, perhaps they should have adjourned this disciplinary hearing, if the tribunal thought that was a matter procedurally that was unfair, or further, if the tribunal thought that there weren't reasonable grounds, there wasn't reasonable investigation, Polky can apply such that the tribunal may decide in those circumstances, if they think there's unfairness at the first stage, the tribunal can then go on to decide, well, okay, had a fair procedure happened, had things been done fairly, what would have happened in that scenario? And of course, Bruce is saying, well, it's clear cut. If there was unfairness, if things were done fairly, if all the wrongs were made right, then there's 100% chance of a fair dismissal, because look at the facts. It all points towards guilt. So that's the Polky test. It's named after a case involving a party that was called Polky. That's what lawyers are talking about when they talk about Polky. Contributory conduct. So when determining compensation, where a claimant to succeed, by this claimant to succeed in showing that her dismissal was unfair, then the tribunal can determine whether through culpable, blameworthy, reprehensible behaviour the claimant contributed towards her own dismissal. So it's possible that in this case the judge might find that it was so clear cut in his view that the claimant was caught red-handed that she, even though there was some sense of unfairness, 100% contributed to her own unfair dismissal. And what that means is that she's going to be left with nothing at the end of a successful finding of unfair dismissal. And in considering Polky and contributory conduct, a tribunal can, between a scale of percentages, 100 and 0, find a balance in between where they think, well, perhaps it's not certain one way or t'other, maybe 75%, maybe 50%, there may have been a fair polky, a fair dismissal in any event, or 50% she contributed to her own unfair dismissal. Any questions on those two aspects? I don't know if Bruce has anything to add to that I've missed out, but...
Nothing to add to that, but what about... Can we have a show of cards?
Just before we go, can I ask a question? Can the judge express, when coming to his decision, take a view on the quality of the evidence? The thing that stands out to me from an evidential point of view is that surely the sensible thing to do was to go and search the cage to establish whether there was another box with the iron in which case the defendant is guilty of picking up the wrong box, not the theft.
Right. There's a couple of things to that. What the judge is looking at is what was said at the time, not what comes to you when you've got a clever person like you or Jonathan after the event thinking up things, okay? It's what is said at the time. So if that wasn't raised at the time,
But
say...
in this circumstance that would be critical.
It might be, but it wasn't raised.
You would do that.
It wasn't raised, so it's irrelevant for the purposes of coming to the judgment, okay?
Okay.
So there's that. Now, what judges shouldn't do is provide a view prior to it, because then they can be asked to recuse themselves, all right? You've made a decision, you haven't heard all the evidence, you're not hearing this, okay? Hardly ever happens, it's difficult for a lawyer to say, recuse yourself. Judges do it all the time though. What they say is, to Jonathan and I, don't be stupid, get out. Go and speak to one another. That gives us a chance to settle. And that brings me to the next show of cards that I would quite like. Who would negotiate or attempt to negotiate a settlement? So you've got a yes, no. Who would? Who wouldn't?
On whose behalf? As an employer?
Yeah. Oh, either.
Because
Either.
it may be different.
You're both well represented. You both know the strengths and weaknesses of the case behind the scenes because you've been advised. Okay. You've identified the strengths and weaknesses now. All right. They've been identified to you by Jonathan and I, hopefully. Who would have negotiated or attempted to negotiate a settlement?
You saying prior or attempt? No.
On the day, but prior to the judgment, certainly, yes.
So even now.
With there being such a loss of trust between both parties.
Sorry?
Potentially with there being such a loss of trust between both parties.
Yes, okay. Let's have a show of cards. Oh, no's there. It's a harsh punch. You're a no? All right. No, okay, all right. And why would anyone like to say no or wouldn't have gone near settlement? And on what basis? Respondent or settlement or claimant?
I'm saying no from the claimant's point of
Yes,
view.
okay.
Because if the claimant's has a settlement, there's no innocence declared.
Right.
And therefore she may not be able to get another job anywhere else.
Yes.
She isn't going to get reference.
Yes.
So she needs to be cleared.
Yes. So it's all or nothing for her.
Yeah.
Well,
different for the employer.
on that, win or lose, there'll be a judgment. Okay.
Yeah.
So her next employer puts the name Tina Leaf into the site. All judgments are online now. Okay, from 2016. Puts that in. Her next employer identifies one. She brings claims to the Employment Tribunal. Nuisance to an employer. Okay. You read it, and there's a possibility at this stage, before you've got a judgment, that judgment is going to say, yes, she's got a Pyrrhic victory. She's been unfairly dismissed, but she's contributed by 100% to it because she's a thief. Okay. There's a massive risk for that claimant.
There's a risk if she settles, it's still there, isn't it?
Well, if it settles, there's no judgment, okay? You can settle with a reference, which is factual, and you shouldn't go beyond factual. In fact, if I ever see a reference which is glowing, it pricks my ears, because you think, well, they want rid of that person. Okay, you see doctors who they want off, get them out of the NHS, get them to a private clinic. They're amazing, their timekeeping's brilliant, their skills are second to none, get them out, okay? It's frightening. So she gets a standard reference, and she can say to her next employer, well, I left for whatever reason. I left because I didn't like berries anymore, I like Tesco's.
I changed my mind.
Okay. Who says no on behalf of the respondent? Was that, did you? Still saying no?
Yeah.
Let's hear it then.
Because whilst process was incorrect, I still believe it was correct to dismiss her, just believe the process to get there was wrong.
Okay. All right. So to get to the tribunal on a one-day hearing, how much? If you're not an insurance policy or anything like that, how much?
10 to 15.
10 to 15,000 pounds. I dare say the majority of the cost of the system.
Plus that.
At this stage, you've already incurred that.
You have. So it might be that you're not interested at this stage, but also your negotiation.
And plus, it opens floodgates for people to bring claims if they think you settle.
Can do, but you're in a supermarket, there's going to be a load of claims in any event. But Jonathan and I are pushing at the same door, even though we're on different sides, okay? And we're in the same chambers. We were together in Birmingham yesterday against each other. We frequently, although we're in the same chambers, go against each other, okay? So we're friends, we can go for a coffee afterwards, but in the tribunal we're battling, okay? But on a without prejudice basis, we both know what we're on about. I'm saying to him, you're going to get a Pyrrhic victory here. That's what I think. Okay, she was unfairly dismissed. There's no secret about that. But look at the chances of contribution, Jonathan. Look at the chances of Porky. She's going to come away with no money. Okay? So even though she wants on the schedule of losses are huge, always, they're ridiculous. She wants £1 million on this schedule of loss, even though her income is £15,000 and it's capped at that. Jonathan totally appreciates that. He would be saying the same thing in my shoes. I'd be saying the same thing in his shoes. And we can come to an agreement. It's probably going to be quite low financially, and we all go away. Okay? One, berries don't have an identification, that their security systems are so bad that they've got a history of large sums of goods being stolen. Okay? They're not an easy target. Haven't got that. You're right. Could open the floodgates, because Tina goes away and says on Facebook, even though it says that we want confidentiality both about your dismissal and the terms of the settlement. Well, we're not going to sue her. It will cost more to sue her for breaching that agreement than it is to get the money back that's in it. All right. And Facebook, everyone does crazy stuff on Facebook all the time, which is a godsend often to employers, frankly, certainly to us when we're attacking evidence. So there's that. She'll go on and say, well, I achieved a settlement, and look, I'm off to Barbados, even though we've settled for £500.
Where's the incentive for the respondent to settle based on the fact that you'll get 100%, likely to get 100% contributory?
Well, is it likely in this case? How likely is it? They never give 100% really, okay? They might go 25%. That might be 25% of £15,000 in addition to your legal costs, okay? And then you have a judgment out there saying, well, you've messed up. You've got this entire HR department, you've messed it up. It's dreadful. And look at Miss Hannah, she's crazy.
I wouldn't want to give her anything.
No, I'm totally with you. But
she's already got the fee for 14 days.
You've got to you've got to be commercial. You've got to remove.
We've probably sold them on already.
You've got to remove your own emotion out of it, frankly, and just be commercial about it sometimes. And it's a bitter pill to swallow, but you have to be commercial about it. And when Jonathan's speaking to Tina, at the beginning of her relationship with him, it's all about principle, okay? get to the tribunal, it's just about money. Okay? Everyone starts off, I'm really disgusted by this. And I've been doing this for years, and I've literally met one claimant who was only about principle. She was a veiled school teacher. It was about 2006 I was involved in this. You may recall it, but she was a teacher teaching language with phonics. Her face was covered through the Muslim religion. I can't remember what this. Anyway, her face was covered, and she was offered huge amounts of money just because Jack Straw got involved. It was in the newspaper. When I was much younger, I was involved in a press conference around the world. I've never been so frightened, frankly. But she was just all about principle, and I've never met a single claimant who's only bothered about principle since her.
What a shame.
What a shame. You're talking about human nature, though.
No, what a shame.
Our society operates on the compensation of being compensated through money, I'm afraid.
What a shame.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so any questions? It doesn't need to be about unfair dismissal. What I would say is this is simple, okay? This is really simple. Take legal advice, okay? It's a frightening world without it.
It's not fun. That's the first time that's ever happened. And the last.
But please feel free to ask any questions. We'll hang about afterwards as well, so you can, if you want to have a chat, please do.
I wanted to ask where the respondent is not a solicitor, where the company is representing themselves because they can't afford a solicitor, because they're a small company, and therefore the respondent is likely involved in the actual claim itself.
Yes.
How is that dealt with when if you're acting as a respondent and you're also going to be called as a witness or cross-examined?
It frequently happens where you have claimants representing themselves, and that's just through financial reasons. The majority of respondents do get legal assistance, but you do get them doing it on their own or have somebody from HR to do it, okay?
Well, that's more, we don't have an HR department either.
Yes. So what happens is that, frankly, the judge gives quite a lot of leeway to a litigant in person, okay? They appreciate that you're not represented, appreciate that you don't know the nuances of law, and it's explained to you, and you are given a bit of leeway. So if you're giving evidence and being cross-examined, then you get into a strange position often where you can re-examine yourself.
That's the bit that I'm puzzled about.
So what happens is that if I'm on the other side, I don't try not to be too fussy, not for the benefit of the person who's representing themselves, but just so I don't upset the judge, okay? It doesn't do any good, all right? So what you do is you're allowed to highlight areas that you think have been challenged and you've not said the right thing or you want to give more detail on it, okay? But re-examination is quite tricky, I think, because one, you can't be led on it, all right? I can't say to you, you've got a striped top on, haven't you, if I'm re-examining you, okay? I have to say to you, you've got a sweater on, can you explain to the tribunal what pattern is on it? Okay, you say it's striped, all right? Because otherwise I'm leading you, aren't I?
Yeah.
All right? So on re-examination, you can't do that. What also re-examination does is highlight a bad area, because if someone's, it was Miss Hangham who says it's automatic that I dismiss on theft, all right? Well, I've got the opportunity to re-examine. The danger is, one, I'm highlighting that problem, okay, really highlighting it. The second danger is that she says, yes, Mr. Frew, that's absolutely right. This happens all the time. Yes, it's absolutely right. Of course it's automatic. I'd never consider mitigation when it's something like theft or gross misconduct. And it happens all the time. It's a nightmare, really, because you think, come on, witness, my witness, we're trying to win this. You're not even meeting me halfway. Okay? So it's dangerous to re-examine.
If I re-examine myself, at least I know what answer I want.
Might be wrong, though. It's a dangerous area. Any more questions?
Bruce, just a question from me, sorry.
Yes.
Doesn't look like she appeals the outcome. How would that impact the claim that the procedure was unfair?
So you can reduce any compensation by up to 25% because she hasn't followed the ACAS guidance, just as you can in relation to, it's usually the other way around, isn't it, when you say you haven't followed the ACAS procedure, I want an increase of 25% or up to 25%, exactly the same. Sorry, I saw another hand.
Yeah. I was just saying, how much does the judgment vary between judge and the different judges?
What would you say?
Smile says it all.
In terms of format, it's the same.
Yeah, no, I mean in terms of the way they look at it.
In terms of the outcome?
Yes.
There are cases that are more fine line than perhaps this one is. And in those circumstances, let's say you've got a case 50-50 one, then judges can decide the same case very differently. It's different tribunals can think differently, and that's a litigation risk. So I think it's fair to say that what the lawyers think to be the likely outcome, if that's very likely, then that's likely to be the outcome in the tribunal. But some cases are borderline, and because they're borderline, they can go either way, and that comes down to the tribunal what they think. So generally speaking, my experience is, well, if you've got a strong case, then it's likely you win, and you're not surprised. But those borderline cases, well, that's a litigation risk.
But
It's
witnesses can be car crash.
They can, but judges are as well. The first thing I do when I get, you're not allowed to know who the judge is prior to the hearing. Okay, you get there. The first thing I do is look at the judge, and I make a decision in my own mind how they're going to respond. So there's a judge. I've had sleepless nights because of this. He's retired now, which I'm genuinely pleased that he's retired. I can't stand him. He's making me stutter. He used to sit in Hull, okay, and as I grow older, you just do more and more respondent work, okay. That's to do with money. You become more expensive as your call increases. And this judge would open the tribunal by saying, I'm an ex-law centre solicitor, spent 20 years doing that. I was at Thompson's before, trade union firm, okay, and I campaign on behalf of claimants. Oh, brilliant. Lovely. I'm for the local authority today. And you're saying, and he would be crazy. He was so claimant friendly. So on that basis, if you've got a borderline case, as Jonathan says, you look there, see that chap, right, I'm going to advise accordingly. That's what you're paying for that local knowledge, actually. But another factor is, if you come to a firm, a commercial firm like this, for example, and you use a commercial set like St. Philip's, what happens is, I'm one of, I think it's 28 now in our team, okay? We only do employment. I know that if I go before a judge, they know that I'm from St. Philip's, and even if they don't know me, they know I'm not an idiot. Okay? I may persuade them otherwise during the course of the hearing, but their first instance view, I think, will be that I'm not an idiot. I make the same calculation. I go against Jonathan, and I think, oh God, he's probably going to have a point here. He's not just running it on empty and just talking nonsense. He's a smart. I hate saying it, but he is a smart bloke. He's going to run this properly. He's not going to miss the points that others might, okay? You come across barristers like that all the time. It's a small world like everything, okay? You'll be in Southampton tomorrow, you meet the same bunch of people, all right? So on that basis, the judge is looking at who you've instructed and which solicitors you're going through, because they know if you go to... I'll use this firm as an example, but any commercial firm, Evershed, something like that, if there's nothing in the case, you're going to run it, okay? If they have something in the case, there's been attempts to settle this, all right? They know in the background that that's happened, so that they know they're going to listen to the advocates on this, all right? And the judge will pay attention. If you've got your example, for example, litigant in person, claimant, and then a respondent on their own, the judge is just, how do I get rid of this?
So, the next question is, what happens at the preliminary hearing? Because we have one.
It depends. It depends the purpose of the preliminary hearing. So ordinarily it's for case management where nothing's going to happen. But you need to know what the issues are, okay? You really need to understand that. So the judge will, to a certain extent, particularly if you're litigants in person, say, well, these are the components of a Section 15 discrimination claim, okay? What's the something arising from disability that you rely upon? And if you're, I'm not sure, okay, it looks dreadful. It doesn't actually matter because it won't be the same judge probably who hears the substantive hearing, but it's about case management, so it's nothing. But they can also be to strike out claims or to get a deposit order, okay?
So they will say, well, you haven't got anything here, so...
Yeah, well, it can be fatal, a preliminary hearing. And also the rules enable a preliminary hearing to change. In reality, they don't, okay? And if someone says, if you've got someone pompous like me on the other side and I say, well, I think it should be struck out, sir, and you've got the ability under section whatever of the rules to do that, the judge will just, shut up, Mr. Frew. There's been no warning of this. If you're going to have a strikeout hearing, we'll set it on another day, okay? So it's nothing to really panic about, but you just need to know your case. But people frequently, even lawyers, turn up and they just have no idea.
Not us.
No.
I've got some clients here.
So, you know, when you said that people do turn up and they represent themselves, it's just a strange situation. So I've worked for 2 places where they refused solicitors, so you had to go and represent whether it was discrimination or unfair. Is anyone from Capita?
I did a Capita case on Monday against Capita.
Okay, so Capita very, very rarely, 1% of the time, will take on a solicitor. So the HR team, you have to go and represent the case. And there's been a couple of situations where the judge has made a comment and said, you haven't got a solicitor. And then obviously I work for a company where we do use solicitors and we use right hassle.
Yeah.
So is there an expectation that if you're a company that is seen to have the money or has a credibility or a PR, is there an expectation that you should take a solicitor, or is that just a judge saying, why have you got somebody?
The judge is just wondering why on earth you haven't, because it's a world now. It used to be a world a long time ago. Even in my time, showing my age, I remember being able to smoke, certainly in the waiting room. Of course, that's gone. But it used to be a world where you'd have a trade union representative and a human resources personnel manager, they were called then, and they'd just sort of knock heads. And it wasn't a world for lawyers. But now it's undoubtedly a world of lawyers. It's crazy to go to it because the repercussions are huge and the law is extremely complicated. As I say, this is simple stuff, and it's not simple. An unfair dismissal, you start going into whistleblowing, trade union stuff, any type of discrimination. It's an absolute labyrinth to go through. Tupi is one of the worst things to understand because you're just on a meandering course where you think you've got the answer, and I'm speaking as a barrister who specialises in employment law, and you just hit a brick wall and you think, right, that's changed, and I'm meandering again through this unpleasant area of law. It's a lawyer's world.
Okay. I think our judge is ready. Should we get him in?
So would you still session at home?
Sorry?
Would you still look to make a session now?
No, too late.
All right, let's start a bit.
Thank you very much. Do sit down. So, in this case, Miss Leaf claims unfair dismissal and notice pay against Berry's supermarkets. I've been greatly assisted by both counsel in this case. The factual background is that Miss Leaf was employed by Berry's supermarkets for 7 years, then on the 1st of April, she wanted to buy a discounted iron. She was on duty. Staff are not allowed to purchase items whilst they're on duty, so she thought she would hide it in one of the store cages at the back of the store. Whilst at the cages, she was met by Rachel Salome. Rachel Salome is the general store manager, and Miss Leaf explained that she was putting an item aside for discount. At that point, Miss Salome offered her an iron which of a similar iron which had been returned to store, and so the box was open and its instructions were missing, and for that reason she offered it at a further discount of 15%. That much is agreed between those two witnesses, and then Miss Salome went to the customer services at the front of the store to collect the returned item, and there is a record of CCTV footage which shows what then occurred, and that CCTV footage appears at page 44 in the bundle, and it was at 10:56 hours on the morning that Miss Leaf was at the cage and had the discussion with Miss Salome, and it was 11:06 hours, that's 10 minutes later, that Miss Salome returned and was seen to hand an electrical item to Miss Leaf. And then there is a period of between 11:06 hours and between 11:07 and 11:23 when Miss Leaf was inside the cage before she emerged and returned to her duties. She says that she was simply hiding the boxed item so that nobody else would be able to find it. And then later that day, she is seen to go to the cage, and it's at 3:56 hours that she goes into the cage, and then she goes to the checkouts. At the checkouts, the staff, it appears, had been tipped off to, and we've got a statement from Wendy Williams that she was asked by the general store manager, that's Rachel Salome, that if she was acting as checkout captain, and Rachel Salome asked her, as part of a test basket process, to check and if necessary open a box that looked like it contained an electrical item that was about to go through the self-scan, but only to open it if there was a weight error message. There was indeed such a message, and Miss Leaf was challenged and refused the request to open the box. And there's a statement from Jeremiah Lagg. He was a security officer. He viewed this all on the CCTV. He had been tipped off to keep an eye out at about 4 p.m. by the general store manager. He says in his statement that he saw Miss Leaf approach the self-scan area, passing 3 manned conveyors with no queues before going to the self-scanning area. and saw on his CCTV the exchange between Miss Leaf and Miss Williams at the self-scanning area, and when Miss Leaf, having refused the request to open the box, was walking towards into the store down to aisle 20, which is apparently not in the direction of the customer services area. He stopped her, escorted her to the security offices, having in store opened the box and found, instead of an iron, there were 2 tightly packed rows of computer games. These computer games were the latest computer game of Call of Duty, and had a retail value of some £1,500. Miss Leaf was locked into one of the security offices. It then appears that the security TV was viewed, and then the assistant manager carried out an interview with Miss Leaf. That interview is at page 45, and I think in summary it appears that Miss Leaf appeared surprised at what was in the box, unable to offer any explanation as to why the items were in the box, but of what she believed was an iron. She was then suspended on full pay, and a disciplinary hearing was sought to be arranged. There were 2 occasions where the disciplinary hearing was postponed on account of her health, and there is a letter from her GP, which is found at page 51, which states that she feels bullied and harassed. She had a depression questionnaire, a score of 27, which I presume indicates that she's depressed, has symptoms of depression. Stated in that letter that she informed she's been set up by the general store manager and is facing termination. She cannot sleep, she's lost motivation. She's not left the house, she's in constant fear of the postman in case that brings her letters from Berries. By some considerable degree, the GP says, she's too unwell to consider returning to work at this time, and an occupational health referral was recommended. No such referral was undertaken, but the Berries gave a last opportunity for her to attend a disciplinary hearing, and made it clear in its letter on the 17th of April, page 52, that if she did not attend the meeting would still proceed. At that meeting, the notes of which appear at page 53, Miss Leaf was represented by her trade union representative, Miss Tant, and a request for a postponement was made at that meeting. That was refused. At that meeting, Miss Leaf said plainly that she believed she had been set up by Rachel Salome, and by that Rachel Salome had deliberately engineered the allegation of theft by substituting the valuable gains for the allegedly returned iron which had been obtained from customer services, and then primed the security and checkout staff to catch her as she was leaving the store. At the end of that disciplinary hearing, which was conducted by Miss Rebecca Hangum, that allegation by Miss Leaf was not accepted, and Miss Leaf was dismissed summarily, that is without notice. There's two claims which are now pursued. The third claim of sex discrimination was not pursued before me. It was withdrawn orally, and so I formally dismiss the claim of sex discrimination upon withdrawal. So the two remaining claims are the claim of unfair dismissal and the claim for notice pay, which is commonly referred to by lawyers as a claim for wrongful dismissal. And if that claim succeeds, she would be entitled to notice pay of 7 weeks. So far as the law is concerned, I remind myself that the burden is upon the employer to prove the reason for the dismissal. It has to be one of the potentially fair reasons for dismissal, which appears in the Employment Rights Act, and conduct is, of course, a potentially fair reason for dismissal. And if those hurdles are jumped, then I have to decide whether the dismissal is fair or unfair, applying Section 98, which is whether the employer acted reasonably or not in all the circumstances having regard to equity and the substantial merits of the case. Past cases have given guidance on that, and in particular the case of Birchall against British Home Stores, which was cited to me by both counsel, and I have to be satisfied that the employer had a genuine belief in the misconduct, that belief was based on reasonable grounds, and that in arriving at that belief, the employer had carried out such investigation as was reasonable in all the circumstances. And further, that the employer had followed a fair procedure, and in that I can take into account the recommended fair procedures which are contained in the ACAS Code of Practice. And then lastly, I have to decide whether or not the sanction of dismissal was reasonable in all of the circumstances. When I'm considering well, I assume that's a fire test. When I'm considering whether the employer has acted reasonably, both in its choice of sanction, the investigation, and indeed in the process adopted, I remind myself that I'm not to substitute my decision for what I consider to be reasonable for their decision. There is scope for reasonable persons to come to different decisions about how to approach matters. The test is whether what this employer did is within the range of reasonable responses of a reasonable employer. If we get to the stage where there is an unfair dismissal in assessing the compensation, I can ask myself, well, what would have happened if a fair procedure had been adopted, and if the dismissal would have occurred within a specified time, a certain time within any event, compensation can be limited to that, or if there is a chance that dismissal may not have occurred at all, I can reflect that in compensation by reference to that chance. Then there is also the power in the Employment Tribunal to, in an unfair dismissal claim, to reduce an award on account of blameworthy conduct of an employer. I have to find that the claimant is guilty of blameworthy conduct that has contributed to the circumstances of the dismissal, and that in all the circumstances it is just and equitable to reduce the award, and I could, if necessary, reduce the award to nil. And so far as the wrongful dismissal claim is concerned, a person is entitled to notice unless they repudiated the contract, that is, acted in some fundamental breach of contract that entitles the other party to terminate it summarily. And both questions of contributory conduct, that is the blameworthy conduct, and whether or not there's been a fundamental breach of contract are matters which I decide, having regard to all of the evidence I've heard today, in distinction to the Birchall test, which is deciding the reasonableness of the employer's decision having regard to the circumstances at the time of the dismissal. Helpfully in submissions, Mr. Hurd for Miss Leaf conceded that the reason for the dismissal was conduct, and that the respondent, and by that he means Rebecca Hangum, had a genuine belief that misconduct had occurred. Those are sensible concessions, and my finding on the evidence in any event is that the reason for the dismissal here was conduct, and that Miss Hangum had a genuine belief in the guilt of Miss Leaf as to the alleged attempted theft. The next question is whether the respondent had reasonable grounds for that belief, and I stand back and I note that Miss Leaf was found with very valuable goods concealed in a box supposed to be an iron. Those goods were not going to be paid for their face value. There was suspicious behaviour in passing tills which were manned by staff, but more importantly evasive conduct afterwards, and the CCTV shows that she had opportunity to put the gaming items into the iron box, and so I do accept that there are reasonable grounds for Miss Hangum's belief. On the question of whether or not there was a reasonable investigation in all of the circumstances, Mr. Hurd said that the two witnesses, notably Wendy Williams and Jeremiah Lagg, should have been interviewed because their alleged aggressiveness would have explained the evasive behaviour of Miss Leaf. My view is that it may well have been a reasonable step to ask them again about what they saw, but in my judgment, what they say in their statements is perfectly clear, and it was reasonable simply to rely upon those statements as written. Perhaps more importantly, Mr. Hurd says that Rachel Salome should have been interviewed herself. He says that she should have been interviewed before any disciplinary hearing, because it's clear on the CCTV footage that she had interaction with the claimant, Miss Leaf, at the cages, and so would have been able to assist. It's also clear on the face of the statements that she ticked off the security and checkout staff, and so there is a good argument for saying she should have been interviewed at that stage. But certainly once Miss Leaf does make the allegation in her disciplinary hearing, that is an allegation which could have been investigated further, and the reasonableness of the investigation isn't just reasonableness in terms of interviews which take place before the disciplinary hearing. The disciplinary hearing is itself part of the investigation, and in my judgment, any reasonable employer would, at least after those allegations made by Miss Leaf at the disciplinary hearing, would have interviewed Rachel Salome and considered what she had to say about that prior to dismissing Miss Leaf. There are other matters which the Mr. Hurd attacks by way of procedure. He says that it should have been disclosed that Rachel Salome was present at a training session in March 2017 at which methods of stealing from stores was discussed, because that would tend to show that she knew how this method of stealing could occur and could prompt her with this nefarious plan to procure the dismissal of Miss Leaf. In my judgment, that's asking a little too much of a reasonable employer, and that disclosure goes too far in my judgment. Other matters relied upon are that it was unfair to proceed with the disciplinary hearing, bearing in mind Miss Leaf's depression. I have to look at this from both sides. No doubt it was very stressful, and I don't doubt that the GP's evidence that she was suffering symptoms or displaying symptoms of depression. The GP's letter does not say she's not fit to attend a disciplinary meeting. It only says she is unfit to attend work. I bear in mind on the employer's side that this disciplinary hearing had been postponed twice already. There was no indication as to when she would actually be fit to attend this disciplinary hearing, and indeed she was suspended on full pay, and so it was a matter of some financial prejudice to Berries. And balancing that, I consider that it was reasonable of the respondent to continue with that hearing. Adjustments had been made because she would have been allowed, had she asked to have breaks during the disciplinary meeting, and she was represented by a trade union representative. The second criticism is made of that meeting that Miss Hangun approached the matter with a closed mind, and cut off the trade union representative and Miss Leaf from making their statements. I've been referred to the notes. It's difficult to get an accurate picture. I wasn't in the room at the time. I can't take from the notes that Miss Leaf and her trade union representative were not given the opportunity to state their case, and certainly what was put in the notes reflects the case that she's maintained today. As for Miss Hangum approaching the matter with a closed mind, it may well be difficult for somebody not to have a preliminary view and not to be able to allow others to see that. But I've seen the notes made after the meeting as to what factors were taken into account, and I'm not of the view that any preliminary view that she had about this meant that the hearing was unfair or unreasonable. A further criticism is that Miss Hangum appeared to rely upon previous knowledge of Rachel Salome in dismissing the allegations of procuring and entrapping Miss Leaf. I don't accept that. It may well be that Miss Hangum was influenced by previous knowledge of Rachel Salome, and some degree of knowledge is inevitable between management at a supermarket. It's not the same as a judicial exercise, and the disciplining officer may well have some knowledge or have met the investigatory officer before or met a witness before. These things do arise from time to time. Perhaps of more concern is that Miss Hangum appeared to take into account previous suspicions that she had concerning stock shortages, but having heard Miss Hangum and taken into account the evidence that she had before her, I'm satisfied that she acted having regard to the evidence that was before her and the clear evidence in her view that was before her, rather than being influenced by previous suspicions. And so overall I am of the view that a fair process was adopted by the respondent. As for the sanction that was imposed, summary dismissal, if there is a genuine belief that an employee has attempted theft of some £1,500 worth of goods, it is extremely difficult to argue that summary dismissal is not within the band of reasonable responses of a reasonable employer, and the sanction was, in my judgment, within the band of reasonable responses. So therefore, on the claim of unfair dismissal, I do find that the dismissal was unfair because the respondent failed to carry out such investigation as was reasonable in all the circumstances in failing to interview further Rachel Salome. But what effect would that have had on matters? It's quite clear that had that been done, it would have taken a few days for that interview to have taken place and for Miss Hangum to have considered that and made her decision, so no more than a week. It's clear that had Rachel Salome been interviewed, she would have given the evidence that she's given today, and the decision of Miss Handgum would have been exactly the same as it was, and Miss Leaf would have been dismissed a few days or at most a week later. So do I proceed on the basis of making an award equivalent to 1 week's pay by way of compensatory award? And do I make an award of wrongful damages equivalent to 7 weeks' pay? Well, I have to look at the evidence that I have before me and decide whether Miss Leaf was guilty of blameworthy conduct in contributing to the circumstances of her dismissal. And that blameworthy conduct is put squarely on the basis that she was actually attempting to steal from the store, and likewise the repudiatory breach of contract that's relied upon is the attempted theft of goods from the store. Looking at the evidence before me and reminding myself that I have to decide this on the balance of probabilities, in my judgment it is unlikely that at 10:56 hours, when Rachel Salome chanced upon Miss Leaf at the cage storage area at the rear of the store and had this discussion over a iron that was being put aside to be purchased later, that in that very short time Rachel Salome lighted upon the idea of using this as an opportunity to procure the dismissal of Tina Leaf. There was no evidence of any previous antagonism between them. It would be very surprising if that reason or that idea could suddenly appear to Rachel Salome, and then on the timings for her to go to the customer services desk to get the games, pack them up in the customer services desk and return within 10 minutes to give them to Miss Leaf appears to me inherently unlikely, and regrettable as it is, on the evidence before me and having heard the evidence of Rachel Salome and Miss Leaf, and taking into account the evasive conduct of Miss Leaf when she was at the checkouts, and in particular when she was asked for her goods to be searched, I am driven to the conclusion on the balance of probability that she was attempting to steal the computer games. Where does that leave us? It leaves me in finding that Miss Leaf is guilty of blameworthy conduct. I consider that she is wholly, she's contributed wholly to the circumstances of her dismissal, and that any compensation which would have been small in any event for unfair dismissal should be reduced to nil, and that the respondent was justified in summarily dismissing her because of her fundamental breach of contract. And so the order I make today is that firstly the claimant was unfairly dismissed, but secondly there is no compensation awarded for that unfair dismissal, and the claim for notice pay is dismissed. Now, is there anything further, gentlemen? I understand that you were wishing to raise a matter of costs.
No, sir, I've taken instructions and I'm instructed not to make that application. I'm very grateful for your time.
Yes, thank you. That's a very sensible decision on costs. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your assistance. That concludes the proceedings for today.
I am sorry we are running behind, but wasn't that a whole heap of fun? Probably one of the best mornings you've had in a long time, I bet. Can we just say a very special thank you to St Philip's Chambers, who've spent their entire morning with us,
Not earning money. So just we show our appreciation. And thank you all so much for attending today, for your participation. I really do hope you found it useful. That is a very condensed version of what could have been a much longer hearing. And I can assure you, Petter could have spoken for a lot longer in his judgment too. Now, I want to let you all go because I know that we ran over. However, I just want to let you also know that we are running a tech week next week. My colleague Christine Jackson is going to just speak for a couple of minutes. There's info in your pack, so if I can just allow Christine those couple of minutes, and then I promise you're released.